Tēnā koutou katoa. Councillor Peters, if you would mind taking your seat. No mai, haere mai, ki te hui kaunihira o whānā rei. Taite, o rua te whaumarima o Akupapa. Welcome to our meeting for Thursday the 25th of August. I've asked Councillor Golightly to open our meeting with council. Your worship.
Kia ora te marino, may peace be widespread. Kia whakapapa, honanu te moana, may the sea be like greenstone. Hei huarahi, matato itirangi nei, a pathway for us all this day. Araha atu, araha mai. Let us show respect for each other. Tato ia tato katoa for one another. Huie taiki. Bind us all together.
Thank you, Councillor Golightly. Councillors, there are a number of housekeeping matters which I'll be going through before we commence our hui this morning. Firstly, of course, our meeting is being live streamed. Also, we have received supplementary reports. Item 4.1, there is an additional speaker today, so this is in your supplementary agenda. Item 4.1, the additional speaker will be Robin Redfern from the chair of the Cross Advisory Group. We've also a supplementary report, item 8.9, the Better Off Funding Tranche 1 funding proposal decision. And in honour of our Hapu members who are here today, Hapu and Iwi, we will be bringing that item forward in the agenda after the police report. Item 1.5, the confidential item, the Kōtata Heights Palisade Wall easement and encumbrance update, that will also require a decision to be considered as extraordinary business just before the motion to move into confidential. And there are one or two other things that will come up as we proceed through the meeting. Everybody's present, so there are no apologies required. So we will move to item 4, which is our public forum, and we have the first speaker for our public forum is well known to us, Zelka Grammar. It's a pleasure to welcome you back in the chamber, Zelka. Please come forward, and I can reassure you that the information that you have circulated has been read by everybody, but we welcome you here today for your public forum, and as you well know, it's a 5-minute speaking slot.
Thank you. And morena everyone. It's my pleasure to speak to Council today. Our community group, G Free Taitokorau, as well as my farming colleagues, would like to thank Whangarei District Council for the leadership that you have shown on the important GE, genetically modified organisms issue. As far back as 2003, as a formative member of the Northland Auckland Inter-Council Working Party on GMOs, in addressing the concerns of local ratepayers, including farmers, the risks of GMOs to our biosecurity, our unique biodiversity, existing GM-free primary producers and their valuable enterprises, our economy, food sovereignty, heritage seeds, and cultural values. WDC has done us proud as a formative member of the Working Party, not only acting in accordance with the wishes of local ratepayers and the Local Government Act 2002, but honouring the precautionary and prohibitive policies of all Taitokorau iwi for their respective rori and addressing the concerns of Northland Conservation Board. We are most grateful that WDC and the other Northland and Auckland councils have taken a stand for truly sustainable integrated management in the face of central government inaction and major deficiencies in the Hazardous Substances and New Organisms Act. Deficiencies in HASNO, sadly, as identified by Local Government New Zealand and many councils, as well as primary producers and local mana whenua, include the fact that IRMA is not, or now the EPA, is not required to take a precautionary approach to outdoor applications for controversial and risky GE and GMO applications, nor are there adequate liability provisions. So I'm here today to bring up some really positive news, which is that Kuiper District Council has released its exposure draft, the draft district plan, and in that plan, among many other issues that they are addressing, are wonderful precautionary and prohibitive GE/GMO provisions. So finally, Kuiper District Council, as one of the other formative members of the working party, is finally actually, I suppose as part of the review, the rolling review of the district plan in general, is actually emulating what WDC and FNDC have already achieved in their operative district plans, as well as the direction provided by the Northland Regional Council in the operative regional policy statement and the regional plan. And we asked today that Council, WDC, even though we're aware that staff are very busy, could WDC allocate a staff member out of your planning and development team to actually look at these GE/GMO provisions and ensure that they are fully in sync, if you like, with the wording in the operative plans? And this would be part of the, how would I put it, the collaborative and fiscally responsible approach taken by WDC and all the other member councils. And I would just like to read out the wording from the overview from the KDC exposure draft. The council has decided to take a precautionary approach to prohibit the release of any genetically modified organisms, GMOs, due to the scientific uncertainty on natural sources and ecosystems, and because the risk in some cases can be irreversible. Primary productive farming activities are an important land use in the district and are major contributors to the local and regional economy. This precautionary management of GMOs is consistent with the district plans of adjoining councils. The regional plan also manages GMO in the coastal marine area on the same principles. The Northland RPS also contains precautionary GE/GMO policies and provisions, including policy 6.1.2. So I would just like to finish by noting that there has been of late a lot of, how would I say, hype and spin from the biotech industry, which essentially we've heard for 20 years. There are some new genetic modification techniques, which of course they are saying will feed the starving millions and save us from climate change and, oh, I don't know, there's a long list. It's very easy to claim benefits before the fact while not being willing to be accountable for the risks to the environment and to others. Thank you so much. And I would love questions if there are any.
Thank you, Zelda, for the public forum. And councillors, any questions need to be specific and brief. Are there any questions for Zelda?
Just one, Zelda, do you know the date that the KDC, how long is the early engagement stage? How long do we have to make feedback?
I think the deadline is over here. It's 5 p.m. on the 16th of September. So this is the exposure draft. It's not the statutory process, it is the initial, but they are seeking submissions and feedback, and it would be wonderful if Monterey District Council would at least indicate their support.
Any other questions for Zelda? Zelda, thank you for my beautiful project.
You're most welcome, you deserve it. Thank you so much.
Sure, Zelda. Councillors, our next speaker in the public forum is Brian May. Welcome, Brian.
Worship councillors, members of the public, I'd just like to go over a few things and corrugate in what I'm reading here that has been reiterated of what I said before, that the council is not running as council. The insurance people and the lawyers are doing, you have it written here, that's what I was pointing out last week. Now you've offered Mr. Daisy $3 million in a bond and $3 million to pay him out. But he was awarded $6.1 million by the judge. What the hell do you think an appeal's going to do? $500 a day, more costs for the ratepayers? And I would say that the insurers, your people that were employed, were at fault. Now, we may end up paying that. So what's the delay? Get on with it. Sort the guy out. You've strung him out long enough, 17 years, for God's sake. Come on, bullying's in the forefront. Last week, from the top leader at the top. So this is just another thing of bullying. So I reckon that you need to get your act together and sort this out, this guy. This is beyond a joke. It's just unbelievable. It's all here. Same with the diabetes, I'm sitting on it because I've seen what it is and I know what's happening, okay? It's the same thing. So just get on with it and sort the guy out for God's sake, or look out, okay? I'll let you know. Thank you.
Councillors, as noted, we did have an additional speaker. I can't see Robin in the room, so I'm going to, if Robin Levering arrives, we will take her public forum. So we'll move to item 5.1, which is the police report, and I also don't see any of the member of the police in the room at this stage. So prior to moving on to the other items in the agenda, I have had a request from Councillor Murphy to make a statement to the Chamber today. So Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, for allowing me this opportunity to make an apology and correct a mistake. At a council meeting I made on June the 1st earlier this year. In my debate on the setting of rates for the Hikurangi Swamp Scheme, I made a reference to a large hike in the berth holder fees at the Tutukaka Marina in 2020. I was incorrect in that it was actually the commercial fees which had not been increased between 2002 and 2019, not the berth holder fees. I would like to offer my sincere apology to the Tutukaka Marina Trust for my mistake. And thank you to the meeting for allowing me to make this statement.
Councillor Murphy. Councillors, we'll move to item 6.1, which are the minutes of our meeting held on Thursday, the 28th of July 2022, page 6 of our agenda. Are there any corrections or amendments required to those minutes? If not, can I have somebody move it go through and correct record? Councillor Denny's moved, Councillor Paparola seconded. These minutes also include the confidential section, and I take it you'll vote on those as well. I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 6.2, the minutes of our meeting held on Tuesday the 26th of July, page 14 to 16 of our agenda. Are there any corrections or amendments required to those minutes? May I have somebody move that there are true and correct record? Councillor Paparola is moving, Councillor Peters is seconding. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Now, as I indicated earlier, I am bringing forward the supplementary item 8.9, which is in our agenda. And it's page 5 of the supplementary agenda. And I have on good authority that Councillor Benny is going to be moving and reading the whole thing, which is so good at reading. Councillor Benny.
I don't know if I signed up to reading the whole thing, but I'll do what I have to do. Okay, have a seat, this could be a while. The recommendation is that Council 1 notes that Better Off Funding Tranche 1 funding proposal has been prepared through engagement and collaboration with Ngā Hapu of Whangarei, specifically through Tihuinga and Tikalearea representatives who are supportive of the funding proposal for Tranche 1. 2. Notes that Hapu and iwi have expressed disappointment with the process, particularly that the Department of Internal Affairs process was too rushed to enable more thorough Hapu engagement and feedback for Tranche 1 funding proposals. 3. Approves the Better Off Funding Tranche 1 funding proposal for $9.48 million, comprising 3 programs of work which include priority and backup projects. Subject to DIA approval, the funding proposal includes the following priority programs, outcomes and funding allocations. Program 1, transitioning to a sustainable economy including climate change and natural hazards. The expected outcomes to embed a bicultural understanding of climate risks within Council and support the implementation of adaptation projects. 2.25 million. 1. Transitioning to a sustainable economy including climate change and natural hazards resilience. Punaroko Russell Road flood mitigation and access options business case, 0.15 million out of a total of 2.25 million. Climate change adaptation strategy priority actions, 1 million. Hikarangi Repo environmental improvement options technical report and business case, 1.1 million. With a couple of backup items. You want me to read those?
No, I think we can carry on.
Program 2 is infrastructure and/or services that enable housing development and growth to inform risk and opportunities for mixed-use residential and Papakainga housing development and growth and catalyse investment in the sector, 0.3 million. Part of that is to enabling housing development and growth, 2.1, Papakainga support contestable fund, 0.30 million. Program 3 is infrastructure and/or services that improve community wellbeing and placemaking. I'll skip straight to the projects. Infrastructure and/or services to improve wellbeing and placemaking, 6.15 million, which includes 3.1, a new land search and rescue, land SAR base. 3.2, city safe of 1. So that's of 0.15 million. 3.2, city safe additional resourcing, 0.2 million. 3.3, Māori Wellbeing Kaupapa Māori Program, 4 million. 3.4, the Oakra Sports Park Development and Wetland Restoration, that is now $850,000. 3.5 is the Ruakaka Recreation Centre Stage 1, 0.8 million. And 3.6 is the Whangarei Heads Volunteer Fire Brigade First Response Ute and Building Projects, $150,000. Item 4 notes that other costs attributed to program and project management and contingency costs, program and management costs 0.48 million, program contingency 0.3 million. Number 5 notes that Māori Wellbeing Kaupapa Māori Program will be managed as a contestable grants fund, with individual grant applications being required to meet the overarching DIA funding criteria, and that appropriate governance and management mechanisms be designed as a first step of implementation for council approval. 6 delegates authority to the Chief Executive to negotiate, finalise and execute the funding proposal and funding agreement between Whangarei District Council, the Department of Internal Affairs and Crown Infrastructure Partners for the Three Waters Reform Better Off Package Tranche 1 funding. 7 instruct staff to report on delivery progress of the Better Off Funding Tranche 1 program of the Tika Strategic Partnership meetings and through the Infrastructure Operations Report. Almost there. 8, instruct staff to co-design with Hapu Iwi a partnership model for Tranche 2 of the Better Off funding for consideration of the Council in early 2023. And number 9, notes that Council's opposition to the Government's Three Water reform remains unchanged.
Councillor Vinnie, thank you. Do I have a second for those emergency recommendations? Councillor Ellis is seconded.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. You can stand up for this one. I don't stand up too often. It's my pleasure to move this today. I just, before we get into a discussion about it, I'd just like to look at how we got here. This is a process that has been, some may say rushed, but it's been a fast process as a result of Better Off funding Tranche 1 for the Three Waters reform, and that this council has been offered a total of $37 million as Better Off funding from the government as part of the Three Waters reform. I'll just say that this council has been united right from the start in our opposition to the Three Waters reform, and I want to take this opportunity to commend her worship for her leadership in this matter. For me, it's been a highlight of this term of council, your leadership and your unwavering support of this council and our stance towards the Three Waters reform. We are still opposed to it, and we are still involved in a court case with the government, and so your leadership in this has been outstanding. I'll just highlight item 9 again. Notes that Council's opposition to the government's Three Waters reform remains unchanged. And I want to highlight that because this is unchanged. We are, as a council, we voted on whether to accept this money, and there was a rigorous debate about that. And I accept, and I accept the people who voted against taking that money and the reasons for it, and I respect what they did and how they voted. That's democracy. Ended up, we accepted the 9.48 million. What I do not accept is a press release released to a number of organisations quoting that this is a bribe, councillors lack conviction, and that the taking of this funding changes our position in regard to Three Waters opposition. That enabled a whole heap of Facebook warriors to disperse, to look at this council as dishonest in what we were doing and how we had turned because of this funding. You have a look at the word bribe. Bribe means dishonest. To say that this council, the council laws here are dishonest is just unbelievable in my mind, and it's something that I just won't forget. So we'll move on. The projects in this that I've read out, and I'm sorry, it may seem a little bit higgledy-piggledy, but the projects here would not otherwise have gone through the normal council process. This is additional to what the council normally does. Projects like the Oakra Sports Park, being able to finish that off. Anybody that went out to the Mokau Marae and saw the kids that presented to us on basketball court, on a hard court, on a playground, and the alignment of the sports fields and the wetlands will know that that is a project that's gone on for a long, long time without funding. This enables that to go some way towards completion. The Punaruku Road flooding, for decades that has flooded. We need to look at a resolution for that, and there needs to be some answers for that. And I've added the last thing today, one of the other things today is the Whangarei Heads Fire Response Ute Vehicle. And I apologise for bringing that in at late notice, but I think it's a really worthwhile project that will save lives. Again, this would not have happened without this funding from the Three Waters reform. So yeah, I encourage you all to support what we've brought forward and to work together to use the next tranche of funding. And let's hold firm with our response to Three Waters reform. We were united, we're not now. Let's hope we can get that back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bini. It's up for debate. Councillor Rockwood.
Worship, I'm quite happy to stand at this point here and talk to the motion which has been proposed by Councillor Benny and seconded by Councillor Innes. A couple of things there that have been made quite clear. And I have to agree with some of the comments that have been made on this recommendation. That a lot of people do feel it's rushed. Who have made it quite clear to us how they feel it's been rushed. Point 9, which actually clearly says that council is still against the Three Waters. Yet, I made a very clear statement previously to say the way this funding has come to us is not fair. It makes us feel as though because we accept this money, we are losing our values. Now, the projects that have been listed here are highly commendable projects, highly commendable. You know, you've got the Para Bay First Response Vehicle, it's well and truly needed. City Safe additional resourcing, absolutely well and truly needed. You know, there are things, all of these things are well and truly needed. However, to make a statement to say that these projects would not happen without this funding is actually incorrect. They could have. Central government have put this offer to us in a way that actually changes our values. Where we turn around and say, It's okay to still oppose the government, but here's some money anyway, because we're going to push through the agenda of the Three Waters. Your worshipping councillors, I cannot stand here and let our government continuously push through agendas which are actually going to affect our rates, our residents of this district, not just Hapu, but the whole district. Our community is highly upset with the way this government has approached this, is highly upset with the way that they have treated all people in New Zealand in relation to the Three Waters, and Tranche 1 and Tranche 2 are just doing more of that. They are encouraging more bad behaviour of pushing through agendas. Now, while I commend these projects that have been offered, I do say very, very clearly that I cannot support this because our community has not been consulted. Hapu have already expressed their concern. We have not heard from the concerns from our disabled, our elderly community as well. And there are many projects within our community which we'd love to see going. And we have a central government which still refuses to put funding into Northland that it should have done many years ago. And one of them I'll just list off, which is the hospital, where they should have put $1.2 billion into it, but they're putting $572 million, which affects our whole community. So while the government puts ahead this, I'll call it a bribe, I don't mind calling it a bribe. While this government puts this money towards us and tries and convinces us to hold on, to change our values, to change our positions, I say no to that because we need to stay firm against them in relation to taking and stealing assets which do not belong to them.
Thank you, Your Worship. I take issue with Councillor Cogarella and your comments. I feel that these are times of change. COVID has come along, and our relationship with central government, along with our relationship with Hapu, is one that has to evolve. It's one that council has to be agile. It has to be able to respond to change, and change is something that will be on the agenda for a long time. We don't want to be over-planned. We need to be able to respond in the interests of our ratepayers. I firmly agree in terms of opposition to Three Waters where it relates to ownership of assets. We have quite clearly stated that we are an outlier, and as an outlier, we are in a better position than other councils within New Zealand, and we firmly agree that we own our assets and we want to ensure that that is fully recognised. But we also need to understand the situation that the country is in terms of Three Waters. And here we are today. We're looking at trying to respond in an effective way to meet our community needs. So it was with pleasure that I actually seconded Councillor Benny's motion. So I feel that yes, it's rushed, but there are times of change where we have to consider how we respond to these changes. So I think that the list that we have, the way, the process that we went through was collaborative, and it's something that I feel that we have really looked after our ratepayer. But in the same token, we have also held to our legal action in terms of ownership of assets. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be abstaining on this vote because I missed both of the workshops where it was discussed. I wasn't able to be present, so I will be abstaining. But I would like to just make some comments, and I also, like Councillor Benny, take real issue with the word bribe. And I know that it has created a lot of public concern, and a number of us have had to try and explain and front that issue, that this council continues, regardless of people's political stripes, if you like, this council, to a person, I think, continues to oppose the government's Three Waters reform. But at the same time, we feel quite able, though it was an interesting and split vote, but we are able to take that money because, and I'm going to read exactly what was said by the Department of Internal Affairs. The funding agreement for the Better Off package does not prevent or prohibit councils from doing this, i.e. opposing the Three Waters reform. For the avoidance of doubt, publicly criticising and expressing opinions on reform cannot reasonably be expected to have an adverse effect on the reputation, good standing or goodwill of the Department or the New Zealand Government, and would not represent a breach to the funding agreement. So taking this money is quite a separate process to what one's position, council's positions is the Three Waters reform. The other thing about the funding is, I do disagree with Councillor Benny on this, that the projects wouldn't have happened without this funding. I think a number of the projects that we have in this are actually projects that would in other ways have been funded by this council through our rates and through our long-term plans. While I'm abstaining from the vote, my concern really is that we had $9.5 million from the government that we could have actually done some substantial and significant projects with, rather than doing what we are doing, which is drip feeding a whole lot of little projects. There are three key themes for that funding: sustainable economy, climate adaptation, infrastructure, particularly housing, and community wellbeing. And that's the headings, as Councillor Benny read out, that's the headings under which the funding is being allocated. I just think we could have actually made some really significant changes, and I keep thinking about things like pension and housing, and also Papakainga housing, and I accept some of the money towards that. But here we've got money in our long-term plan for increased pension housing, but we haven't got enough money. We all know that. Here we had an opportunity to actually get some more government support for that particular area and for Papakainga housing. Community wellbeing. We've got some money in the budget for our new theatre development here as part of the civic precinct. Not enough money. We could have actually put some of that funding towards that and also towards Hiawa, which we now have entrenched too. So I think and I think with sustainable economy, I'm sure a couple of councils could have thought of some quite major projects that we could have done with taking that money and using it in a lot more of a bulked way. I am really quite concerned about the way that we're just drip feeding little bits here and there to different projects. And I know from being on council now for 3 terms, money can get moved around. You know, if we need $200,000 for something, we can staff can recommend to us, oh, we'll take it from this budget, we'll move it forward, whatever. So I don't accept that a number of these small projects weren't able to be done within the current council funding. So that's my concern. I see things like CitySafe, which I think is a police responsibility, and the more we keep picking up that cost, the more the police are just going to keep walking away. And I think it's really unfortunate that we're putting this money towards things like that. However, as I said, had my little say, and I am abstaining on the vote because I wasn't part of the actual vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duckworth. Councillor Peters.
Thank you. I do support the motion and the amendment that's put by Councillor Benny. And I do note that the focus of this money was climate action and housing, specifically mentioned, and well-being. We've put most of it towards well-being at this stage. I think that we could have done differently. I agree in that way with Councillor Cuthbert. There were reasons given why we couldn't, but I see that other councils have done this. Wellington City Council put their whole lot towards housing. We could have done it. We're actually putting 0.3 of the 9 million towards housing, and there will be some for Papakainga. I'd also like to speak about the relationship with central government. I think that this council should and does have the relationship of challenging and opposing, but also collaborating. And we need to do both of those things respectfully, whatever the colour of the government. In order for us to progress our area, we need allies. So we don't necessarily need to be, we can challenge, we can take them to court, but we don't need to slag off them, whoever they are. We need to form that relationship. And I'm hoping that we will actually do that as we move forward. Thank you.
Councillor Peters. Councillor Murphy.
First of all, I just want to say I definitely do support the recommendation today, and I think Councillor Benny spoke really well because he covered all the big bases. I think when it comes to the Three Waters reform, there is a lot of, the public have a lot of questions, and the public understand that there will be some benefits and there are some risks. It's a very complicated issue. Just looking at the reform website, my thinking has been directed to the flooding and damage that we've seen on Three Waters infrastructure in Nelson, Marlborough, the West Coast. There are, as Councillor Innes said, our council is an outlier, but many councils will not be able to afford to pay for the huge amount of damage that they're going to see occur more regularly to their stormwater, wastewater, drinking water infrastructure. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I also want to say that one of the main things that came obvious to me right in the beginning of this process was that Lanai Mahuta made it clear that co-governance was one of the main outcomes, you know, one of the main purposes behind the reform, and I support that. I support that one whiri, as my friends would say. I support that absolutely. With this process, I just want to say it was fast, and I did some research. I looked at all the other councils, not all the other councils, but I looked at other councils across New Zealand to see how they managed this process. Some did it the same way as us. They got together with their local hapu partners and came up with a list of projects. Other councils just came up with their own list without consulting hapu, and other councils actually went out for full public consultation to get public feedback on their projects. So I thought that was quite different, looking at how different councils have managed the allocation of this money. I think for me the thing I want to highlight is number 8 in the recommendation, which is instructs staff to co-design with Hapu Iwi a partnership model for tranche 2 of the Better Off funding for consideration of the council in early 2023. So for me, that has been, when Councillor Cutforth talked about the projects, I think it's amazing when we have our hapu partners, the projects that come out are actually quite different, which I think is fabulous. We're looking at projects which are about taking care of Te Taio, Papatuanuku, Te Mana o Te Wai. So I think that's fabulous. So I definitely support the projects that we have come up with. Yes, that's all I want to say, but I just want to acknowledge that for hapu, you know, and for council, it was a learning curve. You know, there were some issues that came up, but I really have faith that with our fabulous staff, we're going to get better at figuring out how to do this together. Ngā mihi.
Councillor Murphy. Councillor Kumba.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I guess as we sit here in the chamber, and it's a place where a lot of interesting things happen, isn't it? For me, it's always about the outcomes for our people, and I think that is the oath that we take when we sign on as councillors. The Three Waters proposition does not offer our people the outcomes that we deserve, and we've been quite clear about that. Councillor Benny has congratulated you, Your Worship, on the leadership that you have shown in fighting back against that, and as a council we continue to do so, unchanged as a result of this item that is on the agenda. And it's unfortunate in some ways that this item has been used to try to cloud that issue, because it was never in doubt. We always maintained the right to oppose Three Waters because the outcomes for our community were not what our community deserved. And as Councillor Innes has said, we are an outlier, and we will continue to fight that. However, as Councillor Peters has said, there is an opportunity now for outcomes for our community that we can address some needs, and this is what we are doing today. I'd like to congratulate the staff who worked under an enormous amount of pressure to pull together a list and a system under a time frame that was imposed upon us by central government. I'd also like to congratulate all parties that took part in those negotiations, some of them are here today, because we all had to move outside our comfort zones. We all recognised that there was a goal for our community and that those outcomes could be achieved if we worked together to find solutions. So what we have here today is, I guess you could look through and yes, you could find things that you might change. But the overarching lesson and the overarching goal has been achieved, and the lesson we've learnt is that when we are put under pressure, this community can come together and get the results. And in doing so, we have identified areas that we may want to change as we go forward to the next time, if there is a next time. But in the meantime, we have achieved some real concrete achievements for our community. So thank you. I will be supporting the motion as it's been put.
Councillor Connor.
I've not agreed with the whole process and how this has gone. I've tried to stay consistent in my approach to this, and as a council, when a decision is made, we need to support that decision as a whole, as the decision is made, whilst also respecting the opinions of each individual person and each resident of our district. Not only the voters, not only the ratepayers, everyone and everything that is within it. This is about water ownership, not water ownership, water ownership of the infrastructure and whatnot. But this particular fund here is to support our communities. I'm not going to go on a negative tangent, I'm going to stick to the positives here. I have tried to make sure that those who do support this, because there are people within our district that do support this, have been heard, whilst acknowledging the majority has gone in this way. I have not agreed with the way that central government has gone about this thing. I disagree with many parts about how it is, and many comments that have been made throughout the whole process by many different people. One of the things that we have within our document are projects that have come up through, that staff have had to acquire and get through, and these have come from the community over time as well, whilst acknowledging that there have been recent requests that are more maybe urgent or definitely desirable as in housing and whatnot. It is one of those things that community has spoken, and we are aware of these projects. I've been really happy to work with, I was only able to attend one of the workshops, but I was really glad to attend with the Habu reps, and at one point in time they were sitting around the same table as I, so I was able to listen to the discussion and their disagreement of how the processes worked, but also the support that they gave to particular projects in regards to how to decide. I also am very supportive of co-governance. Personally, as a child, I never liked change. I didn't like it. It wasn't about that. But as I've grown up, I've had to actually realize that change is everything. Change actually it may feel scary sometimes, but listening to stories of places that have had that co-government side and actually collaborative approach has actually benefited the area, has really strengthened it and really given some fantastic outcomes. I support the well-beings and getting everybody healthy water and a healthy environment. Just yesterday, walking down Bank on Hartley Drive, coming up to a stormwater tank, seeing the pipe at the other side of it going down the bank, flowing into the river with rubbish littered the whole way through. We have a lot to improve on. And however we get that way, we need to. My values have not changed. I have not given into anything else. I am stuck with this. I'm supportive of our district, of our family, whānau, friends around us as well, because our district have arbitrary lines of looking after us, but we actually have different lines than Hapu and iwi themselves, which already cross over boundaries. I support healthy water and healthy environment, and I'm supportive of this whilst respecting the disagreement that has been there, because we have many opinions, many feelings, and this is going to support well-beings that I really feel are needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Connor. Councillor Bernard, thank you, Richard.
I actually voted no to accept this money, so sitting down that day when we were doing our tranche fund workshop felt a little bit uncomfortable for me, and I sort of felt a bit like, you know, I said no to this, but then here I am sitting there, you know, talking about how to spend the money. So I sort of had a bit of a think about that, and I will be supporting the amendment. I do accept that our position hasn't changed, and I do trust my council, and I trust my fellow councillors that that's the case. And yesterday we spoke a little bit about sort of all staying true to our principles, and I think we've all done that. They may be different, but I still believe that we have all stayed true to what we're here for. So I'm comfortable, and yeah, we
go back, accepting the motion. Thank you. Now the debate. Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, Your Worship. And first of all, I think all the people who will be watching this telecast wouldn't have a clue what we're talking about. And because none of this has been out in the public, and that's really concerns me. How can we get a process like this when the public out here, all our ratepayer groups have no input? So I need to explain a few things. This is not a long-term plan or an annual plan process run by this council. So we're now in a process followed by the government offering money to this council and all councils around the country on the Three Waters reform. So it's bulk funding from the government dropped down to us, and so we've got to determine what we do with it, or whether we should accept it. We've made a decision to accept it, but this is about allocation of those funds. So I learned years and years ago that when you get in a game, you follow the rules of the game that you're in. And now the government has set criteria that states quite clearly that hapu and Maori have to be included right from the start, and there's indication of co-governments, there's indication that 50% of everything should be going that way. Those are the guidelines set down by government that we've got to consider. To our ratepayer groups out there, and you'd say, well, how can we get this far? Well, as simple as we had a short time frame. The government said, get a list to us back by a certain date, and this is what we're trying to do today, and it has to be done today. You can't delay it any longer. I just want to pay a bit of tribute to our Te Kārere and Hapu members of our district, and it's been mentioned before by Councillor Benny and how our mayors led the process of Three Waters. I think we do far, far better when you get leadership without conflict. And that's what we're trying to do through Te Kārere, is to put the issues on the table, be brave enough to talk about them. Visit the maraes, where all these little projects now are coming up. And that is pointed out by Councillor Benny, and we had great presentations out of Mokau the other day, and on previous occasions, and also other maraes. This is an opportunity to actually make things happen right across the district that miss out on our annual plan, as some councils think we can get funding through the annual plan. I just want to bring up one that I know the past history of, is the Ruakaka Recreation Centre. They came in 5 years ago and asked for assistance from council. Council hummed and hard. The second time they came back, we actually gave them some money that went towards the car parking area of their project. They then went out and acquired provincial growth fund funding, so they passed all the tests from that. And this was allocated 2.5, 3 years ago. Since then, they've been modifying their design, seeking funding from everywhere else, and haven't been able to do it. They even came to our annual plan process and missed out again. Here's a project that meets government criteria, missing out on our local Wonga District Council annual funding. Here's an opportunity through this fund that we can get them 800,000 and they can go on and finish that project, start that project and complete the first stage. That is what this fund's about. And go back to just go back to what we're here for. We're here to represent our communities. We're here to represent our ratepayers, but it would have been a far, far better process had the whole public area known about what the fund meant. And it should have been explained, not by us, by the government. It is their responsibility, and I think they've let everyone down, but I'm sure as long as they stay here as a council, I'm not going to let them divide us, between us and our local hub and our community, that we've spent a long time trying to pull together. So we need to work together, do our very best we can, and continue the process. So I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Yes, it's a very interesting process. I'm bitterly disappointed that all of our public weren't able to put their projects forward. All of our public, iwi, hapu, all of the people, because heaps of people I've spoken to had no idea this is going on. In fact, virtually I haven't spoken to many who do. So, my first question, I have a question to start with. If we spend this money and the Three Waters does not proceed, what happens then? That's the question I have. Please.
Councillor Martin, my clear understanding is that the Tranche 1 Better Off funding is not linked at all to the Three Waters Reform Programme. It is so therefore, should the Three Waters Reform, the Water Services Entities Bill proceed, then the funding is secure. Should it not proceed, the funding is secure for Tranche 1. For Tranche 2, it is contingent on the Water Services Entities Bill proceeding.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And we have in excess of $1.3 billion worth of assets in Wonga, including all the land, Western Hills and all sorts of stuff, our collection areas. That's all up for grabs. And we're in court arguing, in the High Court, arguing to keep our assets, and we're taking this money from the same hand, which I find extremely uncomfortable. It doesn't fit right. But I voted against accepting this money because I believe it compromised us, and I still do. But one of the other things that's disappointing me is, at Oakra, years ago, we formed a group to build a facility out there. And it's been underfunded, and a lot of the people who've been on that committee for a long time are here, and are currently still on there. And we had a process, and then this morning, we get another item which is going to take more money out of that particular advancing what they need to do out there. Another field so they can have proper rugby there. And we're going to fund it to fail. Fund it to fail. People need to drive out to see what's being created in the community, and the rest of it they've been busting to get the money for, and we cut 150k out of it today. I'm really disappointed with that. I don't agree with it, and I don't think we should be doing it. But clearly that's what's going to happen. And we definitely should have communicated with all of our community. That's my main thing, is we're taking this money
we're allocating it without most of our people not knowing. And I've asked heaps of them. And I think that we're here to represent all of our people. We swear an oath to do that, and we should have asked all of our people. So yeah, this is a funny process, I have to say. We have the meetings in confidential about where the allocations are going to go, and even less of the public know. And I'm talking about all the public, not just certain sectors of our community. So it's damn frustrating for me after a few years to see this. So it's interesting. I'll wait for the rest of the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Worship. Early in this debate, this was referred to as being normal council process. In my mind, this is as far from a normal council process as we could possibly get. It's been rushed through, as usual, from the government. They never seem to be able to actually provide time for us to consult with our general public. I totally support Councillor Martin in saying, it's an affront to our general public to not be able to at least discuss this with our elected advisory groups. We have 3 appointed advisory groups: youth, disability and senior.
Us.
Whatever, older people. And we haven't had any opinions from any of them, even though they are actually our appointed points of contact. We also use our resident and ratepayer groups blithely to put out council information, gather information for us, and as far as I'm aware, we haven't consulted with a single one of them, not even let them know what was happening, other than through the councillors who have tried to let them know what we can that isn't confidential. And trying to decide what was confidential and what wasn't was not easy. So I find this whole process exceedingly disappointed. I also voted against taking this funding because, while possibly it might not be a bribe from government, I presume we'd have to refer to it as a gift. A gift with attachments, possibly. How do we judge that? How do we judge that what we've been told is what they're going to stick to? Because they haven't stuck to anything yet that we've actually been offered or told. And I've no doubt someone somewhere will call me to account for saying that, but it's a fact. It's certainly how I feel about it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be here when we were discussing the little bits and pieces that this was going to be applied to, and I totally support Councillor Cutforth in saying that we could have addressed some really large, important projects, while a lot of these smaller projects should be being covered through our normal allocation of funding after consultation with our public in general. Thank you.
Councillor Dean. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. I must echo Councillor Martin and Councillor Deeming's thoughts. For a council that has had the due diligence in the past to build up a $1.3 million infrastructure, billion, dollar infrastructure, and then through centralisation tactics be offered a paltry 130-something million for it, which has now been downgraded to 37 point something, which now is about 9.5. I find that abhorrent. And I was put here by the ratepayers to guard their infrastructure and make good decisions. Many today may think I'm making a bad one, but to me, if it's not a bribe, what is it? We've heard the term poison chalice, chocolate-coated stone. This is simply throwing pennies at us and taking our pounds away. And I cannot support this proposal in its present form, and I will not do that to my ratepayers. Thank you.
That's great. I think I'm the last to speak before I hand over the right of reply to Councillor Benny. There are just a number of things that I wanted to highlight. If you look at page 21 of our agenda, it talks about the funding criteria. The programme must support one or more of the Better Off package criteria, which is referred to on page 4, and funding proposals must be for either new initiatives or projects and/or to accelerate, scale up and/or enhance the quality of planned investment. The duration of the programme must be 5 years or less, and the total maximum payable is equal or less to the funding allocation. In our case, that's $9.48 million. Those are the criteria. I think one of the points that people are saying is that the community hasn't had any involvement. I agree. I think we've had a difficult process to get here. However, I commend our staff for looking at projects that are in the long-term plan, which is a long community consultation process, and accelerating some of those projects. So many of the projects that we're agreeing to today have already been through quite a rigorous process of engagement with our communities and prioritisation by this organisation. The Department of Internal Affairs have set some criteria that the funding have to be applied to 3 different expected outcomes. And it's been spoken of before, but I'll reiterate them. Transitioning to a sustainable economy, including climate change and natural hazards. Infrastructure and/or services that enable housing development and growth. And infrastructure and/or services that improve community well-being and placemaking. Those 3 outcomes or programs closely align with what this council has prioritised. So I'm really pleased that despite the fact that we are saying that this is funding that was unexpected, and it is, I do like the fact that the outcomes that are going to come are aligning with what we were wanting to do if we had more money. We're not having to go to our ratepayers for this funding, for these programs. This is coming from our taxpayer friends, including all of us in the room. And the $500 million of tranche 1 has the allocation. You'll see on page 29 of the agenda, that's the notional funding allocations across the country. And tranche 2 is only going to happen should the Three Waters reform, as I mentioned before, with the water services entities, should they proceed. And then we've got $28.45 million to have a look at. One of the things that I've also noted in the motion that's been put is the allocation of the funding is, some of it is capital, some of it is operational. Part of the problems with capital funding only is that the ongoing operational funding for capital projects is seldom supported by central government. That means that our ratepayers have to pick up that cost on an ongoing basis. So I'm really pleased that some of these are supporting community initiatives, that they will then pick up the ongoing operating costs, and some of them are programs of work that will be contestable. I look forward to that part of the process, particularly the $4 million that will be going through to the significant work on Māori wellbeing and the Kaupapa Māori program. That will be a collaborative, co-managed, co-governed process. Hoorah! It's a good half of the fund. I don't think we should lose sight of that today. We can complain all we like about the pressures that have been put on us for the funding. I'm proud of the fact that we collectively, as a council, agreed to apply for this fund. None of these projects are absolutely guaranteed at this point. It's still up to the Department of Internal Affairs to go through their process of agreeing to or not our program that we are putting forward. I will put a little plea into anybody from the Department of Internal Affairs who may be looking at this and saying, please, This has been through not a perfect process, but better than some. And we have agreed, and hopefully it goes through today, and these are the projects that we have collectively prioritised. We will do better. The next council will, please, the next council, whoever they may be, will agree and abide by the decisions in this council today to look at a co-design with Hapuiwi and a partnership model for tranche 2 of the better off funding should it proceed. Time will tell. Councillor Benny, you're right to reply.
Yes, some really interesting points. I'm just going to call out Councillor Coccarello again for referring to this as a bribe. That is a slight on all of us. That is unacceptable in my mind.
Councillor Benny, Councillor Coccarello is calling for a point of order.
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
Well, I keep getting offended by this. It was a point of my making a statement of how I felt it was. It was not a point to anybody else or any other councillor on this. This was about how I felt, and I made it very clear it was how I felt.
Councillor Benny, a point of order has been called. I'm not quite sure which
I'll move on if you like.
Point is, but I would ask you that you just respect the democratic process of having different opinions around the room.
Respect is a good word, thank you. So some interesting comments here today, and I find it really interesting, and I want to address some of them. One is, Councillor Reid, I will not do that to my ratepayers. This is projects that go towards ratepayer projects. Here's our ratepayers here. Ask them how they feel about it. These are projects that regardless of what people said here, ask them the Oakra wetlands. That's dragged on for a long, long time without funding. To say that this would have happened anyway is wrong. It may have happened in 20, 30, 40 years, who knows. The Punaruku flooding, the road flooding, we need to address that. Just a comment on Councillor Martin's comment about how we're reducing the wetlands by 150k. We are giving them $850,000 to complete or to make huge progress within that. That has been unfunded for a long, long time. That funding has not been put in there. This is something that we have pushed. Those at the workshop pushed this forward as one of our projects that we wanted. So this is not a reduction of 150k. This is $850,000 to those people to do this project. The Ruakaka wreck was brought up by Councillor Hulse, a project again that has just gone on for too long. We are able to fund and complete this. It is a really good community project. This is full of community projects. Let's wait till the first person is rescued by the first life is saved by the Whangarei Heads Fire Service, and then we'll go, well, we did a good thing. Just lastly, I just want to thank staff, Aaron and Shelley especially, the work they've put into it. While we are nobody's happy with this process. This was thrust upon them. We've brought it all together. We've had some really rigorous debate with Hapu and Iwi, and I want to congratulate Hapu and Iwi for their input into this as well. It's been a really good process. It's a shame that not all councillors could have attended the process, and I understand that why you're doing it, and I respect that. So maybe the next tranche of the 28 million, we can all get together, be united, take it for what it is. This is funding. We take funding from this government every day. Describe this as any different is just wrong. It's the same government. It goes into the same bank account. Where do we fight them there? So yeah, it's my pleasure to support this, to support the community projects that this will bring forward, and I look forward to the next tranche.
Thank you, Councillor Benny. I'll put that motion.
Just wondering, can we take point 9 separately?
Councillor Cutforth has asked that I put items 1 to 8 first, and then item 9 separately.
So I
understand what you're doing. So I will take them in parts.
In division.
And Councillor Coccarello has called for division. So I will put items 1 through to 8. Those in favour, please raise your hands.
Councillor Golightly, Benny, Cooper, Martin, Hulse, Murphy, Peters, Connor, Innes, and Her Worship the Mayor.
Those against?
Councillors Coccarello and Reid.
Those abstaining.
Councillors Cutforth and Deeman.
Now I'll put item 9, and a division has been called for, so those in favour, please raise your hands.
Councillors Go Lightly.
That is unanimous, I can see that.
Unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. That brings us to the end of item 8.9. I see we clap like this in the chamber. I see that Rob Hughes from Police has now joined us, so we'll go back in our agenda to item 5.1, page 4. And a warm welcome to you, Rob. Great to see you.
Thank you. Sorry for being late.
I'm sure you will explain to us why you're reprehending madness.
Well, yeah, just managing risk. Yep. Morning, everyone. Once again, sorry for being late. I'm filling in as the area commander for Whangarei Kaipara this week. Inspector Al Simons is currently away down in Wellington. And yeah, so I've just come in to give you an update on how we're going. So I've broken it down into what's creating our greatest demand at the moment, and it's no surprises. It's the usual things like family harm, mental health, and youth. I'll get on to youth shortly because that'll be about ram raids mainly, and all the that's quite topical. As we always do, we're trying to make sure our capacity is sufficient to meet demand, not only meet demand but beat demand. Pretty happy with the way we're going in that area. What we always do there is just prioritise to risk. So we won't be able to attend every job right in that moment, despite the public's need, wants and needs. But we obviously go to the most serious jobs that involve physical risk of harm. And we investigate those same cases and those in priority orders. So, for example, if you have a fraud case and a stabbing, obviously we're going to go to the stabbing first, go to the fraud case much later in most circumstances, investigate them in the same way. Out of that, you do get a little bit of dissatisfaction for some people, like the fraud complainant who is constantly waiting for their case to be investigated. But for us, once again, I'm satisfied that we're prioritising to risk based on the greatest need. I see everyone's been quite agile, and we've gone from an environment where I've had 2.5 years of COVID and responding to that. Marty's probably already talked about that at previous meetings, but going from the protest activities and the checkpoints and the managing compliance around COVID, we're going back into a sort of normality, if I can describe it as that, where we've got more of the usual types of crimes presenting. The impression is that that's sort of increased quite a bit. And an example of that is family harm. Now, what we've seen over recent years is family harm. We had more reporting for a few years, but less violence in the incidents that we did attend. So that's about our campaigns on family violence, about calling it in, making sure victims were confident to call the police at an early stage, and it appears that was happening because, like I said, we'll get the calls much earlier before the violence occurs. Gives us options to put in strategies to manage that, not only on that night or day, but later on to create, get support for people so it doesn't escalate to violence. But over recent months we've noticed that family harm, there's been less cases reported, but more the violence has started to increase again. So we're just looking at reasons for that and how we might address it. And we've got our family harm team who daily look across those cases and triage them and make sure there's an interagency approach with that. I'll get on to youth now, ram raids. So similar to nationwide trends, we've noticed, that there have been, and you would have seen it all in the online, etc., about the incidents of ram raids. What we did about 6 to 8 weeks ago, we set up a task force, multifaceted approach, not only looking at responding and enforcing, but looking at suppression tactics and prevention strategies to manage the wider causes of what was happening. It was only a short-term strategy because we'd had enough, obviously, and just simply attending and locking them up wasn't working. So out of that, we got a Auranga Tamariki worker, actually based out of Whangarei Station, working with our youth services, who are right next to our tactical response team, who are next to our response team. So our response team respond to the triple ones on the night when there's a ram raid, the tactical crime unit investigate it, and the youth services team look at those long-term strategies to get those offenders out of a lifetime of crime. So having those three teams working closely together and having daily briefings on priorities and individuals who are causing us the most work was extremely beneficial. Went for 3 weeks. Out of that, essentially, we stopped ram raids, and we work with the shopkeepers, we work with families of the youths, we work with other agencies as part of that wider approach. You know, security firms, City Safe, our CCTV coverage, which is great. Adam and his team did a great job, and in fact they probably stopped the crime at one of our local jewellers when Adam's awareness, because he was coming to our briefings about some of the targets, and he saw some suspicious activity. We looked at the footage later on, and it's obvious that these individuals looking at the cameras in the jewellery shop, casing it out for a ram raid later on. We put some strategies in place to stop that. So Adam and his team have been doing a great job supporting us, and Ross with his CCTV coverage, because we were picking up these individuals in town at an early stage. So what has happened though is, although the ram raids using cars, I think the last ones were the one at Torpedo 7, which was a real dangerous one when you saw the footage, how the vehicle flipped over, etc. Whether that put off some of the offenders about the risk or some of the tactics we're using. Either way, the ram raids with vehicles have slowed down, definitely. Now we're seeing a bit of a trend where they're using weapons to smash into doors when laced. Say, for example, the liquor store is open, but the door is closed, and they only let approved access through. So we're starting to see a little bit of a trend like that. Once again, been really impressed with the clearance rates. So with this tactical crime unit virtually solely being focused on ram raids and youth, they know a lot of these individuals through the footage and the good work they do search warrants, find the property, apprehend them, put them through the youth justice process, and then put them some of them in custody, and then some of them get out, start the whole process again. So that's why we're going to look at a more of a mid-term to long-term strategy to reinforce what we did in that short-term 3-week task force phase, to embed some of the interagency strategies we used last time to try and prevent it happening much further into the future. Huge challenges there. I don't need to state them all, but I'm confident that the police will lead this and own it and get everyone on board that we need to, and hold everyone accountable. Talk about other agencies as well. We need to be accountable as well, but also just making sure these youths, these offenders, are held to account. We're mindful of the fact that they're making bad decisions in that moment. There's a lot of peer pressure. Social media is playing a big part, and they get a lot of notoriety out of that, which drives a lot of their motivates them a lot to do more, and in some cases trying to outdo other offenders in other districts, which they see online, trying to match that. But we're doing all we can to match that with proper strategies, and we're trying to stop them getting into that justice pipeline where they're going to be doing this for the rest of their lives. I know they're making bad decisions in those moments. I know they need to be held accountable, and we are holding them accountable, but we're still putting those strategies in place to make sure they get proper support, so that peer pressure is outweighed by proper decision making when they can hopefully look to the future. I mean, we've probably all been there. We've made some decisions when you're teenagers that weren't the best. These cases, we don't want their decisions to dictate their whole lives, how they come out. Yeah, so looking forward to that. That meeting is next week for the mid to long-term strategies. We're working closely with our communities. Example of that, we've noticed a trend where certain dwellings have been broken into in an area, and we're working closely with the community through neighbourhood support and a bit of reassurance and extra patrols and just awareness about the offending that is occurring, trying to investigate that as well as all the other matters we're looking at. That's a quick snapshot for me. Just
thank you for your comprehensive report. That was really good. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions.
Yes.
Councillor Cocorilla.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the report giving a heads up on this. A lot of people are saying, it's young people which are causing a lot of the issues out there, but it's not just young people, is it?
No, that's correct.
Yeah, so there is actually a lot of those who have adults effectively causing a lot of the graffiti, and the young people being blamed for it, or is it actually more statistically higher for the young people causing it?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the graffiti issue and adults being responsible, but I know that some of these juveniles are being influenced by adult members of their whānau or wider group. So it's something that we're looking at as well. So any group structure, we're trying to work on the middle tier and the upper tier as well, who might be influencing them.
And there's been some comments around the chamber about the effectiveness of City Safe. How do you feel about working with them, and how do they work great with you, or do the team work together? Or?
Yep, well I've got our radio in contact with us via radio, so a lot of times if there's a disturbance or pending issue in town, they'll call it in directly on the radio. Once again, we prioritise the risks, so if there's an issue with a drunk person who's not causing any issues, and then there's a family harm incident, we'll have to go to the other one first. So they don't always get initial immediate attendance from us, I do hear that, but generally they speak up when they're needed. We do some training sessions occasionally about radio protocols, when to call us, when not to, what to do and what not to do. Had an issue a couple of years ago when one of them chased an offender down and probably went a little bit too far, and that was just a bit of a correction about we'll just watch and observe and call it in and follow and update rather than get too directly involved. But overall, really appreciative of what they do, and mentioned Adam, he's an obvious standout, but there's others who do really well, and it's appreciated because we can't be in every place on every street corner.
So with the system through the system that we've got at the present moment with the police station, with the cameras, with the CCTV, with the city patrol guys, with the community patrol guys, with the City Safe, is there any part of that which can be improved, made better?
I don't think so. Like volunteers reporting jobs as they happen on camera, they're good retrospectively if an incident happens to retrieve that footage when we want it. I mean, the City Safe listen to our needs if there's a trend where it's pushing elsewhere. And cycle tracks was an example between the schools, town base, and I know they can only go so far, but they're generally responsive to our needs. Okay. And it was a good step, just having them in on our briefings, having the trust in Adam, because our briefings were quite tactical and in some ways sensitive, but we had the trust in Adam to treat that in the right manner. So,
Councillor Benny.
Welcome, Rob. Good to have you in the chambers here.
Thank you.
So a couple of things, just following up on the City Safe. We've just approved $200,000 extra funding for the next 12 months for City Safe to increase the presence in town. There's always been an argument that it's something we should not be funding because it is in fact a de facto police force and they're doing the job of the police in some ways. And I'd just like your comments on that, because when we can continue to increase funding, and that in some ways encourages the police to step away from those roles, for instance patrolling the beat. So are you directing staff to do directed patrolling in areas like the CBD?
Yep, it is on a needs basis as required. So for example, on Friday and Saturday nights, the nightclubs, bars are open, and it starts to become an issue, we'll redeploy our prevention teams to work some of those shifts, and in fact those tactical crime units as well. But if we take the tactical crime units away from effectively chasing ram raiders and put them on a couple of nights during the week and then give them roster days off later and early in the next part of that week, we lose a few days of investigative capacity re-ram raiding. So that's going back to that prioritisation to risk, but we do respond as required to patrols in the city, and in fact during that 3-week phase, part of it was putting extra patrols in there to support Adam, to keep an eye on these juveniles who are active during the day, causing disorder type offending, as well as casing out other premises. The good thing about City Safe is it's full time, and there's a few numbers there. I'm not sure that the police with that prioritisation focus would be able to afford that capacity full time in the city on foot.
Yeah, cool. And so one of my other questions is going to be about working with outside agencies. You've covered that, which is really good to see. I think that's a really important thing going forward. The last thing I just want to touch on is victims. And I'm going to quote from the Tutukaka store, who was the victim of an ag rob where they stole cigarettes and they stole his 2 tills. He located those offenders himself, went to the police, and the police, and this is his words, the police said there's nothing we can do. There was no attempt, and this is from his words, no attempt to recover his tills, which were worth $3,000 or $4,000 each, no attempt to, and no follow-up from the police as the victim. Are we doing enough for the victims in these cases?
So I don't know exactly what he's saying when he says he brought the offenders to the police. I know he posted the footage online pretty quickly on Facebook, almost at the same time he reported it to the police, and the footage was pretty clear as to who certain individuals might be. I think one of them, the mask fell down, there's one in the car park where he'd taken his mask down and you could see it more clearly. But the police responded. They started the investigation from that point on through that tactical crime unit. So out of that, we've got some experts in the station who know these juveniles' faces back to front, know their eyes, know their clothing, what they look like physically overall. So they were onto that from an early stage, reviewing that footage, linking in with another one that had just happened shortly after that, and then there was another one at New Corner Dairy. So they were investigating those that responding in the moment to investigate them, then trying to find the evidence with the partial views you could have through our experts of the footage, and then just linking in all those 3 incidents, and 1 minute that person would be wearing the same clothing right throughout with the same bottle, same description, physical description. So I know a lot of work was done to solve that case, and there's at least two people have been arrested for that one. So they have been arrested for aggravated robbery, and there was a community meeting at Tutukaka about a couple of weeks ago that Al went to, Al Simons, and he answered a lot of those questions about their concerns, which I'm sure included the shop owner. But that was a really clear illustration of the impact that these crimes have on people, because I saw the footage and I felt sorry for that gentleman. But as you know, it takes a little bit of time to piece together all the evidence to get enough for a search warrant to then go to the address. But I'm really impressed with this one individual officer who knows those kids back to front, has pieced it all together through the footage of the various places to get those apprehensions in a good solid case. And Ross has been a big part of the footage as well, where we might have them downtown wearing that same clothing without a mask, link that in, and then we've got a proper evidential case. So we're keen to see if he brought them to the front counter, I'd be surprised to that.
No, he located where they were thanks. Good reply, thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your report. I'm the council rep on the Chamber of Commerce committee, and obviously they're very worried about things, and they're having another meeting on Monday night at the Whangarei Club. I'm sure you know about it. Today, as Councillor Benny said, we've put more money into city safe. There was some discussion about the fact that if we put more money in, the police will do less. Are you able to go to that meeting on Monday night and have some indication that you will have more resources at your disposal to help sort this issue out?
I can talk to you about that later, sir, if you like. Our science is back on Monday. I'll give him the offer of that first. He's the current area commander. I'm just relieving him at the moment. But either way, we can definitely look at attending.
I think it'd be great to attend and great to go with some increase in what can be done, because people really are fearful for their safety and their businesses.
Yes. Bear in mind, what I didn't mention is the 24/7 approach, and I know the response teams who are working 24/7 are really proactive at doing proper patrols around where they're most likely to strike next. That often results in some good prevention. So there's a lot of passion and commitment. Don't always get it right, don't always get our strategies right or our deployments, but there's a lot of good things happening.
Yeah, I want to see the results.
Okay,
thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Peters?
Thank you for making the report to us. I just wanted to highlight what older people are saying to me, that they feel comforted with police walking through, not just city, say in the centre of city, even if that's at limited times. The idea that the police from time to time will be walking through actually raises their comfort level, and that I think is one of the important. I realise that there's actually dealing with the crimes and that takes a lot of your time, but raising the confidence of citizens, especially our older ones, is actually quite, something that you can do too. So giving some priority to that, and that actually backs up the businessman feeling as well.
Yes, I agree. Yep.
Councillor Collin?
Business person.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for the report. I just wanted to bring up one of the points that you mentioned about the youth social worker person that's now in amongst, and I'm very glad to hear that there's now somebody trying to work with the wound rather than just putting a band-aid on it. Has there been, obviously with this person working with them that you may be aware of or not, any idea of what these people who this person is working with need or want to mitigate these things? So you said about the notoriety about some aspects, but as for what we can kind of do as well, be able to provide something for these people to do rather than actually do those type of things. Are they in a situation where it's not being provided by any particular place, or is there anything that you can mention?
I don't know enough about their particular shortfalls as such, but I know that when we're working closer together, there's much better ways to address those if things come up like that. Yeah, it's amazing what physical distance can do, but by just having her there, straight away things move quicker and they've got better results from their end, a bit more accountability, and I'm sure they think the same about us too, that they're getting a better service from us, just being in the same office space. I mean, there's all sorts of things we could try, like in Dargle, there's an officer that set up a gym training program where problem news had nothing to do really. So he set those up where they get up 6 in the morning, go to this gym at the school, work out, get bigger, the boys do, and they have some accountability and some motivation to do something other than crime. And he's kept that going for 2 to 3 years. So got waka ama, we've got other things like that we do in whanganui. But to be fair, there's so many of these ones currently that are part of this group targeting ram race as an example, pretty big numbers, and there's probably some we don't know about. So that's where we're trying to work at that top, middle to top tier to try and get them, but that's a pretty big challenge too. Yeah, thank you very much. No worries.
Councillor Gurley, sorry, Rob, hi Rob, sorry, just keep it really brief. Your, might be a dumb question, but your night shift team, do they patrol around the district, or are they sort of just sort of central based and then they sort of go out and then they respond to certain places?
Yeah, so we have patrol plans, so it shows where all the latest crime is and where the hotspots are. So if there's not a P, we call it a P1, that's a 12-1 call. If that's not, if they're not dealing with those, then they go and patrol those hotspots and do bail checks in those areas, stop people for proper reasons and see what they're doing out in the middle of the night. And then sometimes they use little strategies, which we won't talk about, just to try and catch people basically. So that's our 24/7 response.
But they're just based around your sort of hotspots as opposed to just kind of cruising around and just
Yep.
having a look.
Yeah, so that's mainly without saying too much, but I mean most of your demand's going to be in Whangarei City, so that's where they cover most. Occasionally they'll redeploy to some of the outlying areas, you know, just if there is a, but they've got to stay in the city because that's where most of the calls come from. Yeah.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah.
Well, I just had one question. One of the alarming things from my perspective is these attacks on business premises where, you know, I think of Steve had Georgia in the town basin, and for many years the town basin has not been a place where you would expect to have an attack on a premise. But are there any advice that we can offer to businesses to protect, you know, I mean, obviously you mentioned the liquor store, the dairies, the enjoys, you know, places that have items that can quickly be moved on and obviously give some return. Is there any advice that we can offer?
I think it's just about just we call it target hardening, so just the good security measures in place around their shops. I mean, bollards, I know they're cost a certain amount, but I've read an email, I haven't read the whole thing because of the way a bit of the flu yesterday, from the district commander. It's about a strategy about him, you know, putting bollards around certain shops. So I don't know if it's funded or not, but I'll have a good read of that email after this. But it's about just that awareness, reporting suspicious activity. Even if we can't respond in that moment, that might mean something later on. If someone is like what we call casing out a premises. So those would be the two things, just making sure good securities and physical securities in place, reporting suspicious activity. The third thing is, it's an obvious one, is if something does go down, to keep themselves safe, that's a big priority. So just call it in, but don't confront them if they're ready to shop, because we just don't want something worse to happen. Fourthly, just to ring us if they've got any concerns, if they want advice on anything.
And if people have been a victim of crime, the victim support is, you know, that is an amazing service that's provided.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Thanks, Rob.
Just a quick question, if I could. Has there been any thought given to having a police app? Because I know a lady rang me last night and she had seen some dodgy stuff at Gowrie and in a car. Couldn't remember what the number was. Wasn't a 111. And you know, the star 555, everyone knows it and they can just instantly get on it. It works really well. Could we have that for the general public? So instead of ringing up and taking all the time, they can either text in or something and just take an app that they push, comes up so they don't need to remember a number.
Yeah. So you got these 10-5 and that can be reported online as well through the police website. Yep.
I'm just saying that nobody knows the numbers and nobody knew them. But
yeah,
if there was an app with the police on it, bang, and you could send the message through, it would be much easier for people who.
Yeah. I think the more options we have, the better. I know the app could be an extension of the website and the 10-5 and the 10-5. So, yeah.
Just an easy way, people.
Thank you.
So we'll be able to solve the nation's problems thanks to Councillor
Well, I'm certainly hoping we can.
Well, I think communication is the key.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and we see a lot of the online comments as well, so we're across, you know, what the community feels, so that's important. Yeah.
Thank you, Rob. Now, councillors, I just need somebody to move that the council note the report.
I'll move.
Councillor Innes is moving, councillor Conlon seconding. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Rob, thank you very much. In your relieving role, really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
We're up to item 7.1, which is on page 18 of the agenda, the financial report for the month ending the 31st of July 2022. With a recommendation that council notes the operating results for the 1 month ending the 31st of July. I'll move for that recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Deming.
Yeah.
And Mark, Councillor Martin is seconding. Councillor Deming.
I think the report pretty much speaks for itself. I would ask though whether Mr. Adcock has any highlights that he would like to highlight.
Good question. Alan.
I thank you through the chair. Look, at this stage of the reporting cycle, as every year we're not positioned to produce reports because we are totally focused on the annual report and all the work required for that. But I do know that everything is tracking fine with an assurance. Just noting there that the on the Treasury report, the debt, certainly good to see we're tracking to budget on month 1, as you will see. We often do that. What that shows is that our closing debt was very close to the forecast, which is a good thing. However, next month we will see that debt go down as our first rates comes in. I've got to say that as we're coming on to capital projects, I do not believe we'll end up anywhere near our final debt figure because their capital program for the year is unrealistic in terms of delivery. And we're doing more things today which should make even more out of our reach. So from a financial management perspective, yes, we have a plan with projects in it, but I have to work a plan based on what I believe our financial position to be and manage our debt accordingly. And there's a massive and growing disconnect in there, which is, from my perspective, worrying.
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. I think that I asked this question a couple of months ago and we didn't have the information at the time, but I'm just wondering for the previous financial year what the profit of the landfill was, what was our share that we made on the landfill?
There's a difference between the profit and the distribution. Okay, so because we take measures to self-fund for future development of the landfill there, but there'll be a distribution being approved tomorrow of $700,000 to council.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, distribution to be approved tomorrow of $700,000 to council.
$700,000. Oh, thank you, Alan. That's good.
Any other? Councillor Martin?
Yes. We see these debt lines going up in carryover capital projects that haven't been done, and everybody's getting all excited about them. But we just had another $9.5 million added into our programs and stuff this morning. So how much effect are these bulk drops of money from various government organisations affecting our capital projects? Because they make a significant difference and they distort things. If we stuck with our long-term plan or annual plan, would we be really close to line?
Through the chair, I guess this year I've canvassed with DIA and other government departments previously. I've got real concern that this free money from government is by definition for projects which we've already determined are not within our priority, the long-term plan. So the consequence of that, they come time-bound. So spend the money by a certain date or it goes away. So what we're doing is actually deferring essential works because of this money, and as well as that, we then have to maintain, depreciate, and renew these assets as well, and that's adding a further cost and rate payers in the future that we haven't allowed for rating in our long-term plans. So there are billions of dollars of future rating revenue required across the country from the grants that the government is passing on to councils. So there are no free lunches. Thank you. So as well as deferring works we deem to be our priority, it's adding up to an increase in the capital program. I expect to see a credit rating downgraded later on this month, as a result of what we're saying we're going to do that we're not ever going to do. So it has consequences.
Having said that, some of the projects that we approved were not capital projects, so some of them others. Anyway, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. Alan, I see our water reserves are sneaking up 44.35 million. What happens if Three Waters decide they are going to go ahead? How much of that can we safeguard, I suppose is the word?
Through the Chair, the reserves are based on, ultimately on what we collect between now and July 24, and how much work in the long-term plan we do on those projects. So if we do all of it, that reserve would be a total of $45 million, primarily to do with wastewater, not water. That water one will be wound down pretty much by that time. However, I believe there will be carry forwards in there, so probably more closer to $55 million. The actual mechanism is still being debated. Whether we have to physically pay that money back to DIA or the government at that time, or whether that will be an offset against the no soft funding, which we would, we're again still negotiating. But ultimately, those reserves are transferred along with the assets.
We've done well, haven't we? $9.5 million.
Councillor Hobbs.
Yeah, just seeing some of the comments that the manager just made that I've been bringing up for some time about the carry forwards and deaths. And I'm going to speak primarily to the next agenda item, but on this, you know, I was one councillor who brought up 8 or 9 months ago about the effect the external debt has on our annual plan process and our workload. I brought it into this chamber. I've seen no recommendations come back to us from senior management about how we can actually alter the way we do things so we can speed up the process, speed up the project delivery. I do not accept that we can't do the jobs, because we've never looked at alternatives outside this room. And if we look wider, we'd be able to do it. There's plenty of contractors out there, contractors can do the work, there's plenty of opportunity. And I put it in this chamber, clearly put it in front of everyone, and we haven't looked at alternatives. But so our senior management team needs to grab it. We've passed it as council, this is our workload. The senior management team has to pick it up and make it work. That's how it works in the council.
Chief Executive is furiously writing, and I do know that he's got some updates that he can give us. Any other councillors wish to take this? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 7.2, the capital projects report for the 12 months ending 30th of June 2022. The recommendation is on page 22 that the council note the capital report. Do I have a mover for that?
Oh, good.
Councillor House and Councillor Reid. Councillor House.
Oh, well, I didn't give you 10 minutes to talk to it, so that's really
I was going to move it so that you could.
Okay, so the last 2 months I said I won't be able to discuss anything further on this item until we come to get the final results of the year ending. So this is now the 4th year. I've been saying if you start off in the first 3 months showing a severe deficit, you're not going to catch up. And if you look at the graph on page 28, it's totally evident after 3 months we were not going to catch up. Now, so surely our senior management team has an eye and focus on that as well. You know, council put the workload in based on the asset management plan, based on all the things that staff recommend to council in the first instance. They're the very first things we do. We take aboard what the council wishes and department managers want in the long-term plan and in the annual plan. So we do that. Council considers submissions from outside, then we put it into a total work plan which council considers and passes. So we've already passed that. Now after 3 months, the management should have come back to us and said, look, we're having difficulty, what else can we do? And here are some options we'd like you to consider. That is what management's meant to be doing.
Point of order, I believe management actually did come back several times with the situation and to say what should we do.
No.
Councillor Murphy, Councillor Holst, Councillor Murphy has raised a point of order, and she is correct in that we were regularly updated about the fact that we were not going to be meeting the capital project expenditure yet month after month after month. She's correct.
Absolutely, she might be correct in that, but go back to joining that one. Where is a recommendation to do things alternatively or do something differently? And that's what I've been requesting for 4 years, because it hasn't worked. So just to prove a point, I went back for this 12 years, I was chairman of the Infrastructure Committee, and I went through those annual reports, and the most carried forward we had was $6.4 million in 1 year, and that was when we were building the Wilson Dam. So it was a big carryover project. So let's double that, and let's say that was inflation over since that time. Let's say that's 15 million. That would have been about 12% of our total spend that year, 12%. Our carry forward now indicated on here is 33%, 1/3 of our work not being done. 1/3 of our work not being completed. Put value on it, $50 million, multiply that by the economic development that everyone across the country, standard recommendation, money spent by our council in the community rotates 5 to 7 times. Let's take 5. 250 million of economic development not being spent in our community. That's the reality of dragging it out. I'm not going to accept this graph going up like this when I've been pointing out for a number of years. But other councillors should actually listen to some of the points I'm making here. 250 million of economic development. A lot of people want work, here's more work for them. Our procurement process should be dumped. It's too dear, too costly, too long, and people we're ending up with select contractors now. You look at all our latest contracts, all by one contractor. Look at our I'll use the one yesterday with the airport, Becca, on everything, 4 contracts. What is wrong with our procurement process that doesn't allow other people in? If we allow other people in, guess what? We get the work done. So let's start, and I'm going to send a really strong message because I've been consistent in my approach to this. I've had experience in chairing the biggest committee here in the Infrastructure Committee for years, under 3 different mayors, and we used to hold our expenditure to what we passed in our annual plan. So now 33% is unacceptable, totally unacceptable. And to not have a finance committee to scrutinise it just highlights the need for a finance committee. Thank you.
Someone, do you want to comment?
I've commented on this previously. We've discussed the capital programme and the reasons why the programme hasn't been completely delivered. We've covered off in detail, particularly the transportation space and the problems associated with trying to get the budgets approved by Whakakotahi in regards to this year's CapEx and how we will deal with that carry forward moving through the 3-year programme. So all of that has been dealt previously. I've also covered off how we have dealt with a number of programmes that have come in from central government in regards to trying to fast track procurement, the design, the resource consenting, all that. And some of the issues that come out in regards to direct appointment to be able to get an early start on stuff. So we've detailed that previously. What I'm happy to do is bring back the same information again and present that to you to make sure that you appreciate what we're trying to do.
Your Worship, thanks for the explanation as a CEO and a new one in the role. But you missed the point. I want recommendations to come back. I don't want reports to come back. We've got reports this high. Reports don't get jobs done. It's a recommendation made by our council that encourages you or allows you to go ahead with the project. So I want to see recommendations from the senior management team really firm to how we're going to get this workload delivered. Because, you know, like Allocated equipment, we manage to debt accordingly. That's what he said a couple of minutes ago. Of course you do. That's how you slow hold the projects down so you don't lift your debt level over a certain amount and scare people. Councillors have passed, we've passed the debt level we're happy to go with. That's already there. We should not be managing it to keep under that debt level. We should be pushing the projects that we passed as councillors. Quite clear, very clear.
there's a lot of shakes of heads, and I'm not going to go into the detail. Councillors, this is the report on the final year that I'm going to be here. So I'm just going to point out a few things. Councillor Hulse has said that if a capital expenditure multiplied by 5, we've invested $4.5 billion into our community in the last year with capital projects. Choice. So some of the things that I do want to point out. So the low cost, low risk minor improvement projects, we've doubled that, $2.2 million instead of against a budget of 1.2. You'll note in the Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment projects, $7 million that we've put into our community. Some of them have gone elsewhere because we had to manage it, but that's another $7 million of work. The resurfacing, Seal Road resurfacing was spot on budget, same with the Seal Road pavement rehabilitation, $5 and $3 million respectively. The capital projects for Three Waters, bang on budget, $4.65 million. Again, the data and technology systems for Three Waters. We continue to invest in Three Waters assets as we should. So there's another $2 million that was double. The areas where we haven't met the expected, so the carry forwards. Like you, Councillor Hulse, I'm not proud of the fact that we're carrying forward $50 million, but there have been numerous explanations of why that is all the way through this financial year, all the way through. And so, to have invested $92.7 million in capital projects on the benefit of our district is a significant achievement, which I thank the staff for. And they are as frustrated as we are in not being able to make some of those projects, and as Simon has pointed out, there are multiple reasons for those, and mainly external. So thank you to everybody who has worked so hard for the implementation of the capital project program for this financial year. And it will be, and probably every year I've said, it will be up to the next council to be looking to perhaps not have eyes slightly bigger than our capacity. It's very tempting to want to do more, but there is a capacity issue in the community as well. But yeah, I just wanted to pay tribute to everybody who has worked so hard to implement these projects. Councillor Connor.
Thank you, and thank you for all the effort you do, and the team as well. I just wanted to highlight within this, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but on page 25, on solid waste, and page 28, also solid waste. Of the almost 150 other items within this whole list, this particular item has only had $51,000. It's one of the smallest things on this whole list, and yet almost every single other item on this list goes into these places: solid waste, landfills, and through those type of things. It's disappointing that it's always the one that is the least on this list, and I just wanted to highlight that because it is disappointing. And flood protection is also on here as pretty much zero compared to everything else through transportation, through the water, through stormwater, through the wastewater, support services, community facilities and services. It's fantastic that we do provide as much as we can, but it's been an unfortunate thing, and Alan has a response that I'd love to hear.
Well, further, just to note that in terms of capital projects, the only capex and solid waste that comes through this report is to our transfer stations. Anything to do with capital works at the resort or at the Kura landfill comes through NLP's reporting. So there's lots of activity done there, just not on this particular report. There's definitely been investment in our solid waste facilities for the district.
Just a question. Footpaths are really important, and I was just having a look at the footpath renewals and also the new footpaths. Just wondering if there's any comment from infrastructure. Well, I guess maybe I could ask this in an infrastructure meeting. probably more appropriate. Yeah, I'll just defer my question. Okay, thank you.
Any further debate?
That's right,
Councillor
reply.
Howard,
Simple. Request for the next meeting, because we've still got one more meeting to go. Can the management please deliver this council a works program that can cope with our next year's annual plan spend is well over $100 million, plus the extra 50 million we carry. So we've got 100, the huge bow wave in front. Can you management please present us with an action plan how they're going to face that before the election?
The right
Well, I think
has
it's
been
appropriate.
hit. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against, carried. And we've been sitting for 2 hours, perfect timing. Let's take a 15-minute break and be back at 11:15. Welcome back, everybody. It's gone 11:15. We're up to item 8.1, page 30 of the agenda, the delegation authority requests for approval. Thank you, Alison. We've got recommendations on page 30. Can I have a moment for the recommendations? Thank you, Councillor Dean. You're going to have to read them. And Councillor Cuthbert is seconding.
Now I know why everybody's sitting quietly. Okay. That council, 1, approves the new financial delegated authority to spend up to $5,000 for the following roles as per section 1 of attachment 1. A, role, team leader, rates. 2, approves new non-statutory delegations to approve rating and non-rating refunds for the following roles as per section 2 of attachment 1. A, role team leader collections. B, role team leader rates. C, role revenue advisor. 3, approves removing non-statutory delegations to approve rating and non-rating refunds for the following roles as per section 3 of attachment 1. A, role senior revenue administrator. B, role senior collections administrator. 4, and you will be happy to know this is the last, approves multiple new statutory delegations for the following role as per section 4 of attachment 1. A, role team leader rates. Thank you. And my comment on that is this appears to me to be a reasonable request and business as usual.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor, just to add to that, we do have a delegations register, and it is our duty to ensure that that delegations register is appropriate for the roles. And you'll note in the attachment 1, the naming of those delegations. So you've got the numbers you'll see for the delegation 876. It is the same, but we're adding additional roles who will have that delegation bestowed upon them, lucky people. So yes, you are right, it is business as usual, but it is an important aspect of council business that we as governors understand the delegations and what we are passing on the delegations to, and to the financial values for some and responsibilities for others. Councillor Coparillo?
Madam Chair, usually when there's a passing on of delegations, there's usually a time limit that they're passed on to, and I didn't see within the report a time limit or a time period that they'd be delegated through, or is this a permanent delegation?
Yeah, permanent until they're amended. I don't think there's ever been a time limit on it.
Usually with delegations, we usually put a time limit, depending on, for example, over the election period. So
exactly, yeah, but these are permanent delegations for these roles until they're amended. Any further discussion? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Item 8.2. The big one. You just want to read it all out. Councillor Innes is moving and Councillor Cutforth is seconding. Councillor Innes, your motion is?
Thank you. Recommendation that the council approves the appeals version of the Whangarei District Plan as operative in part, recognising that there are 2 outstanding appeals which must be resolved before the whole district plan can be made operative. 2, approves the affixing of the council's seal to those parts of the appeals version of the district plan which are to be made operative. Notes that a public notice will be notified in the local newspaper and on the council's website indicating that the appeals version of the district plan has been made operative in part. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Councillor Innes, over to you.
Do we need a seconder?
It's already been seconded.
Oh, you have. Right. This is basically a procedural matter, as outlined in Penny's report. I feel that it's logical moving forward with this. It takes the complexity out of interpretation of the district plan and also the administration of it. So I think we can just see over there on the 3 volumes of regulation. It basically means that 1 volume's taken out, and we're just looking at the appeals version, so we don't have to go back to the existing operative plan, and you have 2 interpretations going forward for resource consents. And those applying for it, it makes a lot more sense. So it's with pleasure, Your Worship, that I was able to move and read this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ennis. Councillor Connor.
Just a quick question, just in one specific page of this, just for example, whilst it can't make any major amendments to this, say on page 31 of the below says residential area, it shows that it says areas of indigenous vegetation shown red hatching, but it's yellow. I know it's a thing, but titles of a page and then referring to a map, it does show it in the legend, but can that be altered to actually fit? Cool. There's a couple of them, but yeah, it's just...
Great short answer, thumbs up.
Yeah.
Sorry, through Chair, we did pick up on a number of minor amendments that we will correct as we go forward. That was one of them, which has been raised to the staff. There are some administrative tweaks, but we can do those within the bounds of the Act.
Easy, but also confusing. Last question is, with yesterday's decision of the airport designation, does that fit into this at some stage? How does that process fit in? I'm just curious as to...
Good question. In fact, yesterday was not a decision for a designation. It was the to approve all of the reports that will go through, and then if that site is selected, then there will be a notice of requirement on it. So that part of the process will happen at a later date, and it could be some time away. So it doesn't affect the appeals version of the operating plan. Any further debate?
Just one question, please. In item 1, it says that 2 outstanding things got to be resolved. Is there any indication of time of how long that's going to be?
Through the chair, the 2 outstanding appeals are by Waka Kotahi and Kiwi Rail in relation to reverse sensitivity issues against the railway line and state highways. Originally, we intended to, the court timeframe for that was to have it all settled and resolved by the end of June, but because of various issues with other parties, I do emphasise it's nothing to do with council, it's to do with other parties, both through sickness and through other machinations that the council had not been part of. We have not been able to find a solution that we believe the council would be happy to accept. So that means we're still in mediation with those parties. There is also the issue that the presiding judge, if this drags on too much longer, has already indicated that he has taken annual leave in the latter part of this year, which of course he can do, and he thought that it was all going to be settled by the end of June. So it might drag on till the new year, but we are hopeful that we will be able to get mediation earlier than that. Once it is resolved, then we will have to come back and get that part of the plan made operative by the council, and of course that will be the new council, because it's not going to be settled before you cease to exist as a council.
Thanks very much for the explanation, it's very clear. The only point is now is Waka-Kotahi and Karangaora are now becoming the self-delegating authorities, and I can see them playing a really long game here. But anyway, we are where we are. Thanks for the explanation.
Councillor Martin.
Just a question. If there's going to be changes made to our recommendation, what used to happen was the CEO and the general manager of that department, we authorised them to make minor changes or what needed to happen. Are we just moving to a state where the staff can make changes after we've made a recommendation now?
So through Chair, there is a provision under the Act to make minor amendments with delegation staff to do that. They are very clear in what constitutes a minor amendment, and there is case law around that. So it's things like a colour of hatching that is clearly incorrect that we would then pick up and do an amendment. Those amendments are all published alongside the plan on the website.
Yeah. Just thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a belts and braces, you know, approves the CE to make minor changements in accordance with, but I don't think it's necessary. I'm pretty comfortable with the explanation that's
It's good explanation.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. My question is similar to Councillor Connor's. I'm just thinking about the NRC's natural hazards plan change and how that kind of fits in with our review.
Through the Chair, if you remember, we've had some previous discussions with this council about a draft plan change on natural hazards, and after that early engagement we had on those draft plan changes, what we identified as staff was a need to do more technical work to ensure that they were robust and would stand up to scrutiny if they went through the formal process. So that work is ongoing, and the intent is to bring back those a final proposed plan change to the new council in the new term to get feedback on whether or not this council wants to publicly notify those plan changes. In the interim, you still have NRC's maps that are up on their website that indicate issues around natural hazards that they refer to get an idea about how coastal hazards or flooding might affect their property.
Yes.
There's just no district plan rules attached to those maps at the moment.
Thank you for reminding me. Thank you. That's good.
Councillors, to me, I just want to pay tribute to the staff who've wanted to bring the final, complete version for us to be able to make the operative plan. But I take your comments around this is more efficient and customer focused to pursue the recommended option, which is today to make operative in part. And just having those two appeals that are yet to be resolved. And yeah, it would have been lovely to have wrapped that up in this term, but it's not going to happen, that's so be it. But this is the most pragmatic approach and really makes sense, and I'm sure the streamlining and not having two versions to have to refer to will make a big difference for our people who process the important work of what the district plan covers. Councillor Coparulo?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just had a quick question in relation to the airport and the possible legal action by noise. Will any of that make any changes or differences to the district plan?
No, through Chair, the provisions and the designation and the noise provisions in the district plan have all been through a Schedule 1 process. They would not change as a result of that if there were to be action.
Any further debate? Unless you want to reply.
No, I won't take it. Other than, well, it's pleasing actually because we have a rolling review of our district plan, and I'm pleased to see that we've been able to get through to this stage. It would have been nice, Your Worship, to have it operative, but I'm also mindful that we've got the RMA review just around the corner that will change everything again. So again, another point of change that we have in front of us, but I'd just like to thank staff for the work undertaken. When I was Chair of Planning and Development, we started on the urban plan changes, and it's good to see that we've got to this stage. Thank you.
Right, close your head. I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against?
Against, Madam Chair. Recorded.
Councillor Coparulo wishes to vote against to be reported. And Councillor Cooper, you also wanting to vote against that?
No, I'm wanting to move the next motion, Your Worship.
Item 8.3. Temporary road closure for the Rugby World Cup. Now, Councillor Cooper, I know you want to move it, but I want you to make the following slight amendments. So, Sunday the 9th of October is indeed a Sunday. However, Sunday the 15th of October is not a Sunday, it is a Saturday, as is the 22nd of October and the 29th of October.
Correct.
So if you could just, when you read out this long motion, if you could change those three from Sunday to Saturday, but leave the first one as Sunday.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm pleased that you picked that up, as I had myself, of course. Thank you. So the motion is that one, approves a proposal to temporarily close the following roads to ordinary traffic for the Rugby World Cup on the following dates in accordance with the Transport Vehicle Traffic Road Closure Regulation 1965. On Sunday, the 9th of October 2022, Okara Drive from the roundabout at Okara Drive and Porrawinnie Avenue to the roundabout at Okara Drive and Port Road for the period of 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. The same road would like to be closed on Saturday, the 15th of October, the 22nd of October and the 29th of October for a period of 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. Number two, approve the proposal to temporarily close the side roads of the roads to be closed for up to 100 metres from the intersection for safety purposes. 3, delegate to the Chair of the Infrastructure Committee and General Manager Infrastructure the power to give public notice of these proposed temporary closures, to consider any objections and to either approve, cancel or amend any or all of the temporary road closures if applicable.
Councillor Cooper's moved that. Who would like to be on the second yet? Councillor Cockburn.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. There is no need to make a big deal of this, other than to say that I am incredibly excited about the World Cup coming to Whangarei. It's a great testament to our little city and to our stadium and the people who have put the work in to get the stadium up to the level that it is, that it can now host this great event. The road closure is merely just part of the operations around hosting the World Cup. So that is I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Madam Chair, most people understand I'm heavily involved with the Rugby World Cup, the Women's Rugby World Cup, as I was with the 2011 Rugby World Cup, and as I was with the FIFA World Cup, and I was with the Lions. I'm totally 100% supportive of these types of events happening in Whangarei and actually using our stadium, and I think it's 100% a great thing, and that's why I'm actually involved in it as well as a volunteer.
Councillor Murphy.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think it's great that we can easily just close the roads, and I think we should do it more, like possibly once a week, and just close more roads and reduce our carbon emissions. It's great.
While we sit in the queue on the alternative route.
Just noting, of course, that the Rugby World Cup 2021, being played in 2022, starts the day after the election. Yes. So, there you go. Yeah, I've said it before, the irony, I recall when Whangarei was granted the hosting rights. It was my birthday. It was the greatest birthday present because I was thinking, yes, we have the World Cup. Yeah, well, it's still very, very exciting. And I agree with you, both the mover and seconder, that we've built this facility, not for rock and roll, but yes, some rock and roll. We built this facility, and specifically to be able to attract these world-class fixtures, and not only sporting fixtures, but others as well. So very, very cool. Cool. Right to reply, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. I will go to right.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 8.4, page 52, the revoking of the speed limit bylaw. We've got both Sean and Nick to come and answer all the many questions that I'm sure we've got, or not, to this item. So the motion is on page 52. Do I have a movement for that motion? Councillor Cooper is moving, Councillor Conlon seconding. You get to say it again, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much. I'm just so pleased to see Nick and Sean here and to be dealing with the revoking of a speed limit for once. That the Council revoke the Whangarei District Speed Limit Bylaw 2019 effective the 29th of August 2022. This is to allow us to fall in line with the rest of the country, Your Worship, and I think it's as simple as that. Thank you.
Councillors, just to let you know that all current speed limits in our district have been successfully migrated into the new National Speed Limit Register. And the reason why it took so long, you'll recall this was on our agenda a couple of times, but actually the migration, the great migration, hadn't occurred, so now it has, and we are able to revoke our Whanganui district speed limits by law. So yeah, it is purely mechanical. Anybody votes against this, I'll be going, you've got to be kidding. Go on, Adi. Any debate? Yeah. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. For the continuing the wrong review on speed limits. Item 8.5. Decision making over the election period. Carolyn's really excited about speaking to this. I think she's going to read her motion. Councillor Cutforth. Oh, go for it. Wishes to move the following motion.
Taking as read.
Your Worship, I'd like to declare an interest in 12.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
And this, did you wish me to take that in part so that you can vote on all the others?
No, I'm happy.
To step aside.
Step aside. Yes, I'm happy.
Councillor Cutforth.
Do I get to read it or should I delegate it to Carolyn?
No, don't take away the privilege of reading out this.
Right, okay. That the Council 1 notes that the final Council meeting will be held on 22nd September 2022 and that all other normal meetings will cease then. Decision making prior to the official declaration results. 2. Delegates to any two of the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Chairperson of the Committee the power to make on behalf of Council urgent decisions that may be needed between the final Council meeting and the day the term of office of current members ends. 3. Notes that if a significant matter requires consideration following the final Council meeting and up to the end of the term of current members, an extraordinary Council meeting will be called. Decision making after the official declaration results. 4. Delegates to the Chief Executive the full powers of Council, except for those responsibilities, duties and powers specifically excluded in clause 32, 1A to H, not sure about that bracket, of Schedule 7 of the Local Government Act 2002 or in any other act from the day after the electoral officer declares the result of the election until the convening of the first meeting of new council scheduled for 2nd of November 2022. Don't diary it yet, folks. 5. Notes that if any urgent decision-making process is employed during this period, it will be reported to council or relevant committee as soon as practicable in the new triennium. 6. Notes that if a significant matter requires consideration following the first meeting of the new council and the appointment of the deputy mayor and committee chairpersons, the extraordinary council meeting will be called. Continuity of council business. 7. Notes that the Northern Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Committee continues during the election period. 8. Notes that Her Worship the Mayor will continue as council's representative on the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Committee until her term of office ends on the day after the declaration of the results of the election. 9. Notes that there will be no council representative on the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Committee from the day after the results of the election until the incoming council has appointed its new representative, and that in the event of an emergency and emergency powers are needed, the Minister of Emergency Management can declare a state of local emergency. 10. Confirms that the following committees are deemed not to be discharged on the coming into office of the council elected at the October 2022 triennial elections. District Licensing Committee. Airport Noise Management Committee. 11. Notes that the elected member representation on committees deemed not to be discharged will be reviewed post-elections. 12A. Recommends that the Chief Executive appoint Greg Innes as Commissioner to the District Licensing Committee under Section 193 of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012. And B, recommends that the appointment commences from the day after declaration of the results of the October 2022 triennial elections and ceases when a decision on the appointment of a new deputy chairperson is made. I rest my case.
It has been moved
Second.
and seconded. That's a couple.
Thank you, Your Worship. I mean, Karen Brindle approached me last week, actually, and said, Councillor, have you read your agenda yet? And I went, of course. I didn't. I said, no, actually. I said, why? Well, because of the decision making around the election period. I just want to make sure that you're okay with it. I was like, this is amazing. She said, because of any of them, it's going to be you that picks up on something. So I just had to read that. And I have picked up on, I just wonder about that clause 32(1)A bracket to H in number 4, whether that bracket should be there. Okay, well, you know, you just never know these days what the staff are going to try and put over you. Anyway, I mean, it's just a process that, it sounds really bureaucratic, it sounds really administrative, it sounds really boring, but actually it's incredibly important to have in place a process for while there is that transition of power, and also in case something happens. And I've been reminded of that. In fact, I texted the mayor saying, you know, aren't you glad you aren't, what's her name? The Wilson mayor. Rachel Reese. Aren't you glad you're not Rachel Reese? Who I think is standing down this time. Yeah. And who, you know, is dealing right now with a massive floods. A huge crisis in that area. Now, what if that happened the weekend of October the 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th in this district? So it really reminded me, but I was glad I wasn't there, of the importance of having these sort of things in place. So that's why, I'm happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Duckworth. I have a question. How do you pronounce practicable or practicable? Practicable. Practicable. Oh, see, now I thought it was practical.
Oh, well, yeah.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question of Councillor Cutforth. Is she expecting a landslide of some sort in that?
Touche.
Just to take away some councillors.
Any further debate? I'll put that motion. Those in favour, aye. Against? Carried. Item 8.6. The extension contract roadside refuse and recycling collection and transfer stations, contract 17046. And we've got Sue and David that are coming to answer again all those other questions. Recommendation is on page 16. Do I have a mover for the recommendation? Or actually, probably before I ask for a mover, I would just like to get our staff to cover off the question that I had as to why, when we're not at the end of the 5 years of the first part of the contract, why we are looking at renewing this. I think it's an important point that you need to cover off for us, please.
So, through the chair, the solid waste contract is obviously a big contract and requires a long lead-in time in terms of procurement and contractor time for setup. So, if the decision wasn't made now, then we have a long period until the next council is sitting, and it would put a lot of pressure on if the decision was not made until, say, February next year. So we're taking the decision now.
Thank you, Dave. That's clear. Any further questions before I ask for a mover for the Councillor Murphy?
Oh, okay. Well, I can wait till someone knows that. That's my question.
I just need to declare an interest as a...
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillors, I'll move the motion. And the motion is that Council approves the value of COE 17046, roadside refuse and recycling collection and transfer station, with Northland Waste Limited, being increased by $16,325,736 excluding GST, So it's moving from $26,877,495 to $43,203,231 excluding GST to cover the cost of price fluctuations and to extend the contract from the 1st of July 2023 to June 2025 as provided for in the contract, and Councillor Squire to second that. Councillors, the reason I asked our staff to provide that clarity around why we're making the decision now when this contract, which is totally appropriate, we awarded the contract back in 2018 for a term of 5 years with potentially 2 additional 2-year periods. So that went from 2018 to 2023 with the potential for the 2 years to 2025, which is what we're covering today. And then there is the other potential at the end of 25 to go for another 2 years to 2027 in accordance with the contract. So as David has pointed out, with such a large contract and providing an essential service to the people in our district, it is important for the contractor to have that certainty, for them to be able to appropriately improve their machinery, to ensure that they've got continuity in contracts with their people, etc., etc. So for me, it makes a tremendous amount of sense to be able to do that today. Councillor Peters?
I am opposed to extending this for a 2-year period. There is a large change proposed later this year on waste minimisation, and that will have implications for our contract with the waste management people. There'll be a new council. They may make different decisions, and I would like to suggest that it is for a 1-year period.
That would be require an amendment, Councillor Peters?
Can I do that after I've spoken like that?
I will give you the ability to make an amendment. It's unusual, but so what we would need to do the calculation of what the extension
is it half that?
For 1 year.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Point of order. There is a contract, and it's actually been signed as a 5 + 2 + 2. A variation would mean a variation into the contract itself. So what Councillor Peters is proposing would actually be contrary to what the actual contract has actually been signed by.
We would need to go back to the contractor to ask the contractor if they would be willing to have a 1-year extension. They may not be willing to do that. They may need to buy additional new equipment for the 2-year extension, and they may not be able to get that repayment back within a short period of time, so they may decline, which may mean we'd have to go back out to tender. What I would also add is that if indeed there are changes, we can negotiate those changes with the contractor and get pricing back that we can evaluate, so we can modify in agreement with the contractor. So I think we can take care of any of the issues that you've raised.
So Councillor Peters, I'm going to ask you to withdraw that amendment if you're comfortable with that. Okay. Councillor Murphy.
Okay, I'll speak. So, there seems to just be a massive lack in communication between our management and our governance on the issue of waste minimisation and management. Something is not getting through. This came on the agenda last week. No workshop, no discussion, nothing in issues and updates. Luckily, I've got a massive file. I've got the previous contracts, I've got all the LTP workshops, I've got everything with all the information that we've been given over the last 6 years, so that I could actually go back and see, what proportion of the contract is made up of recycling, what proportion is made up of rubbish, what was the targeted rate, how has that increased, will this cover those costs? I just don't understand when there's 5 or 6 of us who keep saying that waste minimisation is a priority. We're interested in it. We want to be involved in discussions. There is no discussion. It comes on an agenda with, you know, a very small amount of explanation and discussion. But I just implore our new CE that possibly next term, you know, you could do a better job to bring governance along with you in the conversation. Because Councillor Peters just raised an amendment. We haven't talked about that, but I appreciate what she's trying to do. She's trying to actually engage in the process. She's trying to, you know, to say that this is an issue that she would like to have more of a say in and be more involved in and understand more. And it's really just not coming through. So my question for staff was that in 2020, which was the last time, so I've got when we signed the contract in 2017, the budget was made up of 2.226 for recycling, 2.079 for refuse and 1.34 for transfer stations. We were updated a couple of years later on what the portions of the contract, and I'd like to know, could staff please give us a breakdown of within that contract, has the cost of recycling increased? What are the increases? Are they being covered by the targeted rate?
Councillor Murphy, I respect your request for that. I think it's probably a little unfair to ask our staff to be able to respond to that. That sort of detailed question would be really helpful to have had beforehand so that our staff could have prepared for that. And I agree that information is probably really valid. However, unless
I can make a brief comment. The targeted rate was ceased, I suppose, during the last LTP. We got rid of the targeted rate, so the targeted rate is no longer necessarily balancing with costs of the contract. It doesn't exist anymore. The rubbish collection costs have stayed pretty much as expected, apart from increased cost of disposal. And the increased cost of disposal is more or less evening out the revenue that we get from the rubbish bags. Cost of recycling has increased fairly significantly. Processing and less income from materials, or more cost in processing those materials to be more accurate. And transfer stations is pretty much exactly as it always has been.
So the bag sales a couple of years ago were 2 million. Have they increased or decreased?
Bag sales are pretty static.
About the same. With the other question I had was increases in the waste levy. So how much does that subsidise this contract? The levy funding that we're getting, because that subsidises the recycling contract.
Indeed, I'd have to find out the number. The waste levy goes towards our education, towards our community grants funding, and then I suppose additional money that comes in will go to offset the cost of recycling.
Anyway, just to finish, I don't mean to put our staff in an awkward position at all. That's not my intention. My intention is just to highlight that this is an issue that we keep repeating over and over again, and we'd really like to have a valid, meaningful conversation with on how we can actually make some headway. And I know that, as Councillor Peters said, with the transforming recycling, there will be big changes coming, whether it's the container deposit legislation or mandatory organic waste collection. And I really look forward to those changes being implemented. I hope that the government has got time to implement them before the next election. But yeah, my point is really, I guess, to our Chief Executive, in that councillors, come to council with passions and energy, and we have to think really carefully about, how can we make the most of that and really use that to bring about positive change? Thank you.
Councillor McGee. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by saying that I believe the relationship that we have with these Northern Waste is very good, and that the job that you guys run in partnership works really, really well. And congratulate people on that. I think it's actually that rubbish tip and so on is a good example of forethought and of a private public relationship partnership working well. I guess I'm picking up part of Councillor Peters and Murphy's thoughts here. We're 4 years into a 5-year contract. Presumably, when the contract was signed 4 years ago, people looked forward and thought, gosh, that will fall very close to an election period. Did that happen?
I don't think we had our calendars out when the negotiation process, I suppose, went on for potentially longer than expected, and those things at that time were not really considered.
Not top of the priorities that you're working through. Okay, I just wondered also, could you talk me through the $1,619,000 value of the cost fluctuations on page 61, that little table, and so I understand that is to cover increases in costs that occur in the contract that we're currently in. Is that right?
Inflation adjustments, yes.
So what would the process be if we weren't renewing the contract for 2 years? Would you have just come to us and said, these are what we need to put in? Would there be more background, i.e. what rate of inflation you're using, or how much extra rubbish they've picked up, or the cost of diesel, or road user charge, anything like that? Or would we just...
The inflation adjustment, or the cost index, is part of the contract, and it is based on increases in labour cost and transport cost index, and it's published by Stats NZ, and it's basically just those calculations feed through.
It's part of the formula.
It is part of the formula. I mean, I could have included it, you're right, but yeah.
Okay, no, well, I appreciate your thoughts here, thank you.
Councillor Cooper. Councillor Connor.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to ask a question regarding the agenda here. It says, there's been some extension in scope of work, including the servicing of some remote public litter bins and minor maintenance rural transfer stations. Does this include recycling bins, and does that include actually recycling the recycling bins if they are collected within this?
No, so the recycling bins that we have in the public place are collected by a different contractor, because those bins are generally in Whangarei City, and we have asked the rubbish collection contractor to collect from rubbish bins in remote places because they are driving out there anyway. So it's just rubbish. It goes into the contract.
Yeah, thank you. This isn't about the operation of the landfill and the resort. Correct. As this is just a service of actually bringing the waste in, I don't have too much issue with that, because we need to get the waste as quick as we can into these secure and low location facilities. I won't go on to too much about my wish that we can actually improve a lot more, but this is as it is. But I will go down to another point within the background, and it says, Whangarei Residents Survey, June 2022 results indicate 75% of residents are satisfied with curbside rubbish and recycling, and 62% are satisfied with transfer stations and resort facility. Just kind of similar numbers as to in the council of how many people are satisfied or not with the current service.
Thank you, Councillor Donnett. Any further debate? Oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Reid, yes.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple of years or more ago, along with Councillor Hulse and Cooper, we got Te Kureira standing committee going, and we visited Marais, one of them in particular being out just the other side of Karakau. And there was concern from the residents through one of the back roads there in off Opotiki Road, it is Opotiki Road, who have to travel some distance, some of them up to 6 kilometres from the back of Haha Road and Takatu Road, all the way down to the Murray's Road intersection. They don't all work in town and travel every day. So for many of them, and I think there's more than 15 households in there now, they have to make a special trip to that intersection to leave their recycling and their rubbish bags. On the return in the afternoon, when they go back to pick them up, frequently the recycling bins are gone and they have to use alternative methods. Thankfully the contractors have seen that and they still pick it up. But with the increase, surely the contractor would be able to travel that 3 kilometres up the road to the Takatu intersection where there's ample turning. I have driven through there with a log truck and there's room to turn there, which means that most of those residents would be able to drop their recycling and their rubbish bags on that corner, save themselves an awful lot of travel, and they'd probably get their recycling bins back in the afternoon. So that's just something if the staff could take that to the contractor, because we pretty much got bulldozed over the bank the last time I asked. Thank you.
Councillor Reid. Any further debate?
Just one more question.
Question, Councillor Reid?
Hopefully, I'm not sure, but the workers do such an amazing job. They work so hard. Just interested in whether the increased part of that will cover moving their rate of pay up to the living wage, or do you know anything about that?
The runners and the collection crew do a fantastic job. They, having just come back from the UK, I think one of our runners does the job of about 10 of the UK guys. So, yes, there's a lot of credit that needs to be given to them. Their rates of pay have increased as part of the inflation adjustment calculation. I'm not able to comment on whether it meets the living wage or not.
Any further debate? Councillor Cutler?
No, I was going to ask the same question.
Councillors, for those councillors who were elected in 2019, you wouldn't have been around when we were making the decision to award this contract. As the discussion was going on, I vividly remember the discussions that we had, because we were looking at having rubbish bins for every residence in the district. That was what we were looking at changing to having a wheelie bin and a wheelie bin for recycling. And the reason why it took so long to negotiate the contract is because the contractors actually came back with a really valuable suggestion of the blue glass bin. Councillor Murphy, you probably will take some credit as well, and maintaining the collection of waste, household waste in the bags. We went through a lot of angst because we were told about the risk to health and safety with all the glass and the lifting and you know we were right on that cusp of agreeing to wheelie bins. So that was the reason why this contract took so long to negotiate. There probably was some discussion as to whether or not when it came up for renewal would span an election, but that was not the priority at the time. The priority was to provide the best service we could to all of the people in our district, and we ended up with not only the red recycling crate, which I remember well, Councillor Holtz, way back in the day, 2005, Carmel Jones, red bin, and now we have the blue glass crates, and we're still collecting in bags. There are changes ahead, of course, for waste. There will continually be waste. Unfortunately, though, humans being humans, zero waste to landfill is still a long way off. So, in the meantime, this contract is important. We do have contractors who have met their obligations. We've got a contract with them. We can negotiate for it, and I think it's appropriate to approve this today. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 8.7.
Yes,
Revised public
leave the room.
Oh, come on, let me do this, because I was the one who mucked it around.
You can.
All right. Councillor Cooper, you can move.
No.
Read it again.
All right then.
RMA consents the GC Trust.
Thank you. That the Council, 1, rescind the following resolution adopted by Council on the 30th of June 2022. That resolution was that Council approve the name of public road number 1 off Sands Road as Redwood Green Road. We don't like that name, and we're now suggesting that and approve the name of public road number 1 off Sands Road as Redwood Park Road. Been a bit of toing and froing, it's quite straightforward.
You'll need a second for that.
Oh, you're not got a second now? You're falling down on the job, Your Worship. Go for it. Have a look.
I did second it, and you may now continue with your debate.
Thank you very much. It's quite straightforward. I don't think we need to make a meal of this. It's clear following a recommendation from the staff, and there's been a process followed, and it suits the developer.
Councillors, I would like to take this opportunity to formally apologise to the GC Trust. We've really given them the runaround on the naming of their roads and their subdivisions, so hopefully we can pass that on to them, because this really was, I recall in the strategy planning and development meeting, looking at things that didn't meet with our road naming criteria. There was toing and froing, and we sincerely believed that what we were moving was going to be approved. But Lynn's had another process, and I'm sure that hopefully lessons will be learned about the road naming processes. But yeah, I actually do want to apologise to the GC Trust, because this has taken a lot longer than it should have. And whoever the residents of Redwood Park Road are in future will probably have no idea the angst that we went through to get to this today, finally. Any further debate? Councillor Cooper, a right to reply. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, John. Councillors, our next item is item 8.8, the Parking and Traffic Bylaw Resolution for Railroad House Lane One Way. Councillor Reid is moving the recommendation. He wants to have a turn to read out the recommendation. And do we have a seconder?
Yeah.
Councillor Martin. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Worship. Just taking pity on Councillor Cooper's voice. Sore throat that will be occurring shortly.
Sorry.
Call an ambulance.
Oh my God. You should wear a mask.
The recommendation that Council approves pursuant to the Whangarei District Council Parking and Traffic Bylaw 2017 Clause 7 that Rayburn House Lane between the Dent Street vehicle crossing and the Finlayson Street is specified as a road where the vehicles may only travel in the northeast bound direction, and that cycles may travel in both directions. The thinking behind this will be to do with the strategy in the park and ease of operation for longer vehicles, of which I must concur is a requirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Any debate? Councillor Murphy.
So Councillor Reid moved it, who seconded it?
Councillor Martin.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to comment, it's really good to hear those councillors moving and seconding the recommendation, because in the past the city's complete streets master plan has been somewhat contentious, so I'm just really, really happy that they're in support of one of the actions and implementing it.
Sure, I think
Councillor Murphy, Councillor Peter,
Holt.
goodness gracious, I was going to call you Councillor Peters. I beg your pardon, Councillor Holmes.
You just reflect on
I
all the
remember
good things.
Pamela.
You just reflect on all the good things that Councillor Peter's got from council.
Winston.
Okay, so just bearing Councillor Murphy's comment there is just what we said. This actually work should have been done probably 8 months ago, because all the work they're doing now cannot happen unless we give them access out of the car park. So that's how slow this is getting through, Councillor Murphy. So my question is, that is designated now as a delivery lane. It's not a road, it's a delivery lane. So what right have we got to change it under this and call itself a road? Because it's put in there as a service delivery lane and allow both exits. So I think we could have a bit of feedback, a bit of comment coming back from the residents on this.
Shelley, thank you.
Who's going to back up the truck or the car?
Through the chair, we have confirmed with roading the status of that road, and we have been through a process of discussing with the people who use that road along that stretch. They are comfortable with the changes, and I even had a phone call from one of them to just clarify a few things, and they were happy with the way that it will operate into the future.
It's absolutely necessary, because I went down there 2 days ago to make sure it's absolutely necessary to do. But like I said, it should have been part of the proposal way back when we first promoted it. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to, I want to be assured that there's a number of businesses along that stretch, I know, because I do use Southwood. And I just want to be assured, I mean, I understand that town-based businesses will be okay, I understand the residents in the flats above, or apartments above will be okay. I just want to be assured that the businesses that are along that route are okay with what we're planning.
Through the chair, yes, the feedback that we have had is that they will be able to continue to operate and access their areas that they need to get vehicles in and out of. Because we're not changing the width of Rayburn House Lane outside of those businesses, they will still have the same turning space available to enter and exit their premises.
So I'm just trying to think through, presumably if they can't come in from Finlayson Street, they're going to have to come through the council car park, is that right? So would that be, and I mean there's some commercial businesses there, there's a motorbike place there and stuff. Are they going to be okay about coming, or only being able to come through the council car park?
Through the chair, that's the feedback that we have had through that consultation process, is that they believe they can manage that. I don't know the ins and outs of each of those businesses and how they operate, but I have noted that a lot of them are using public space to effectively operate their businesses out of. So perhaps they need to look at the space requirements that they have into the future. Also, the Hihiawa precinct plan sets out the future for redevelopment of Hihiawa, and that identifies that there should not be vehicle access fronting onto Rayburn House Lane as those properties redevelop. So in the future, that should not be a problem.
Okay, no, that's a fair point. Can I just ask another question? Will there be, a lot of people actually walk up and down that road, not on the what's it called? Loop. Yeah, not the car park or whatever. So is there going to be a footpath type arrangement there?
Through the chair, we are not planning on putting a specific footpath in at present other than what is already there. There is a bit of a strip outside of the buildings, but it's not often very clear that it's a footpath because there are often vehicles parked on it. That's something that we will look at with transport into the future.
So that's on, excuse me, if that's on the building side, as you say, where people quite often, businesses quite often have partner bikes, so that's the side where there would be some sort of pedestrian access. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's logical to have the road going one direction for that particular area. It does take care of a lot of issues in relation to people crossing it. My concern is more about the reduction in number of car parks. 44 car parks being removed from that area. Where are we going to find other places for those?
Through the chair, the number is not 44. I believe it's approximately 30, but I could get back to.
I've just counted it this morning. There was 83 car parks and it's going down to 39.
No, 53. Yeah, 50.
Excluding the area that, sorry, Madam Chair, excluding the area which hasn't been changed. At the present moment, there is 83 car parks down there, and it is reducing down to 39 car parks.
I don't know where you get your count from, but I deliberately counted 53. Councillor Peters, then Councillor Clark.
Thank you for progressing this, and I endorse it. And I hope people can find car park next Tuesday when we're having an exhibition in Rayburn House, the Strawberry Tarts.
Councillor Connor.
Thank you. I don't have too much of an issue with this. It's all progressing as it is. Just on the note about the walking access, as Councillor Cuthbert just brought up, most of the time when I'm seeing people walking down that way, it's usually next to the smaller fence. And I think it's probably more open area space where there's a building here where it's quite overshadowing, whereas over here it's quite open. And if generally, I think people will be walking on that side, so hopefully in the future, if we're looking at doing that, we take that into consideration too, because if people are parking over here, which the 40 blocks it, which stops it anyway, the open space kind of people are attracted to is the desire line, because they can get off into the park quicker as well and not have to cross the road. But no issues today.
Councillor Martin.
You say you had a consultation. Did you go to all the businesses, or did you just ask people to put comments in?
Through the chair, we've held a number of different engagement sessions around the town basin, as well as the face-to-face where we could with those businesses. Not all of them were able to be contacted face-to-face, but all of them have been contacted in some way.
That's a problem too. What's going to happen when those buildings need to be painted and they have blocked that lane off and they can't come in from the other way? All buildings need to be painted, the windows need to be cleaned and all that. Is there still going to be enough room for vehicles to travel through? Because what they used to do was when they were doing work there, I remember going there, had to come in from the other end because they had a vehicle in there painting up the wall. So if they can only come in from one end, how is that going to work? Is there going to be some flexibility with that? Calvin wants to answer.
Through the chair, any activities like that would need to go through the fire access process, and the team would assess accessibility and other road users as part of that process. As Shelley's pointed out, the actual road width isn't changing, so the existing access that we've got will be maintained. And also just with respect to the pedestrian, while there's nothing changing in this, the fact that we're now only having one-way traffic actually reduces the risk of the existing pedestrians rather than increasing it.
Let's go lightly. Thank you, Richard. Just so I can be clear in my head, so we talk about the buses are now going to be driving down the buses, that little road.
Yeah.
And out the other way.
If we don't do this, the cars coming towards us.
Councillors.
Are you liberalising this?
Okay, I just find that bizarre. They've got to go, the bus is going to come out of there and go down this little lane.
How are they going to turn around where they unload?
Councillor Golightly, you may find that buses already go down there, they go into the car park space, go through the car park and out that exit, so I'm pretty sure it's business as usual for them. Shelley, I have a question. On page 79, you talk about letter drops describing the proposal have been undertaken, including a door knocking exercise to meet owners, lessees, tenants and residents to discuss the plan of works, and they had a positive response. So do we know that we got a 100% response, or was it that were there any that were unhappy?
Through the chair, I don't believe we had a 100% response, but we haven't had a negative response, just questions and clarifications.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Reid, your right of reply.
No, I'm quite happy with it.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour, aye. Aye. Against?
Again, just
Carried.
to have it.
Councillors,
Be consistent, I voted against the proposal.
Councillors, before we move into public excluded, we do need to have a resolution to consider item 1.5, the Full Title Heights Palisade Wall and Easement and Encumbrance Update. I need a mover to move that item 1.5, Full Title Heights Palisade Wall and Easement and Encumbrance Update, be considered at today's meeting. Councillor Denning is moving, and Councillor Golightly is seconding. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, aye. Against? Carried. Councillors, if I can have your full attention, the meeting is still occurring. Thank you, Councillor Benny. Now I need somebody to move us into confidential. Thank you, Councillor Ennis. Councillor Dennis is seconding. Those in favour, aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much to our support team who have supported our meeting today. We will now move into confidential.